Let's see how much noise I can make. Thank you.
Call the April 9th regular meeting, 2020 regular meeting of Bedford County School Board to order. Ms. Johnson, please call the roll.
Mr. Lemming?
You.
Oh, here.
Mrs. Kirby?
Here.
Mrs. Hairston? Here. Dr. Hicks?
Here.
Mr. Hill?
Here.
Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Dr. Mealy? Here. A quorum.
Do I have a motion to allow board members to participate remotely in the April 9, 2020 school board meeting in accordance with BCPS policy BDD?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we allow board members to participate remotely in the April 9th, 2020 school board meeting in accordance with BCPS policy BDD.
I have a motion for Mrs. Kirby. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Mealy. Discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Good to have you with us, Dr. Hicks.
Good to be here.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that in light of the matter that's on everyone's minds tonight, we move item 10.01 up after the consent agenda so that we could hear the COVID updates sooner rather than later. And also in the interest of respecting the Governor Northam's stay-at-home order, guidance from the CDC, and to keep the topics of tonight's meeting as we had originally intended to focus on the most immediate pressing business of the school division, that we postpone action items 3.03, 3.04, 3.05, and 3.06 until a future meeting once the state of emergency has been lifted.
I have a motion for Mr. Johnson to, say again, Dr. Hicks? I have a motion.
I'm here.
I have a motion from Mr. Johnson to amend the agenda to move 10.01 up to the next item under consideration, and to postpone items 3.03, 3.04, 3.05, and 3.06. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hill. Discussion?
I think those items are important, especially 3.04. So I would not agree with deleting it till a different time. The others are very quick.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to say that I don't think that these topics should really take a long amount of time for us to discuss. They're actually, one of them we have talked about before, so I don't anticipate it to be long and drawn out.
Any other discussion? Mr. Hill?
Are they really the most critical topics, though, that we have to address tonight? I think most people are thinking right now of the COVID crisis, how the school division is responding, the feeding program, continuity of learning, and these other items just don't seem to follow the spirit of the times in which we're in at this moment. Not to say they're not important topics, and not to say they wouldn't be great to discuss at a future time, but maybe May or June, as soon as the scourge passes.
Dr. Hicks, you have any input?
My internet is out here at my house, so I really don't have a copy of the agenda in front of me. What are the agenda items that you mentioned?
10.01 is Dr. Shook's comments on the current situation.
Okay.
Okay, got that. 3.03 is student versus learner use. 3.04 is school board attorney RFQ.
All right.
3.05 is update to school board bylaws. And
All right.
3.06 is the Fun at Bat program.
Okay. And the motion is what, to delay the 3.03 through 6?
Correct, yes, sir. And to move up the superintendent's comments.
All right. I would agree with that. I don't think that we really need to have those 4 items done tonight.
Okay, any other discussion?
No, just again, I think especially the school board attorney is absolutely paramount at this time because we need an attorney.
All those in favor of amending the agenda to moving the superintendent's report up to the next item under consideration and to delay consideration of items 3.03 student versus learner division-wide, 3.04 school board attorney RFQ, 3.05 update to school board bylaws, and 3.06 Fun at Bat program, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Nay. Ms. Johnson, please poll the board.
Mrs. Harrison, what is your vote to amend the agenda?
I vote no. I think we should keep the agenda as is.
Dr. Hicks, what is your vote to amend the agenda?
I vote to move 3.03 through 3.06 to later date and to move Dr. Shook's comments up on the agenda.
Mr. Hill, what is your vote to amend the agenda?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson, what is your vote to amend the agenda?
Yes.
Mrs. Kirby, what is your vote to amend the agenda?
No.
Mr. Leamy, what is your vote to amend the agenda?
No.
And Dr. Mealy, what is your vote to amend the agenda?
No.
Do I have a motion to accept the agenda as written?
I make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we accept the agenda as written.
The second?
I second.
Motion by Dr. Mealy, second by Ms. Hairston. I think we've had our discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
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 Ms. Johnson, please poll the board.
Ms. Harrison?
No.
No, yes,
What?
yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
accept the
Yes.
agenda.
To accept the agenda, yes.
Dr. Hicks?
No.
Mr. Hill?
No.
Mr. Johnson?
No.
Mrs. Kirby?
Yes.
Mr. Leamy?
Yes.
And Dr. Mealy?
Yes.
The agenda is accepted as written. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all.
Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Got a motion by Mr. Johnson. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second, Ms. Hairston. Discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The consent agenda is accepted as written. Dr. Francis, are you out there?
Yes, this is Dr. Francis. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. You have attached tonight the Perkins Plan as required for submission. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Basically, the Perkins Plan covers all of our CT expenditures for equipment, student competitions, and teacher professional development related to CTE.
Everyone had a chance to review the attachment?
Yes.
Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Francis?
Yes, Dr. Francis, this is Dr. Mealy, and I do have one question.
Yes.
I just do not know a lot about how this grant operates and really, even though I looked at it. So I was wondering if I could call you one day, that wouldn't stop me from, voting for this, but could I call you one day and have you just walk me through it page by page so I know I better understand what I'm looking at?
Sure. I can walk you through all the schedules on it and what they mean and how the funds are determined based on our enrollment and other factors. So I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. Just help me better understand it.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion to accept the Perkins grant?
I make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we accept the grant.
I have a motion from Dr. Mealy. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second by Ms. Hairston. Discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Grant's accepted. Ms. Jennings?
Thank you.
Yes, I'm here.
You're up.
All right, so this is the annual special education plan that Ms. Staten went over at the last board meeting. In accordance with the Individuals with Disabilities and Education Improvement Act and the regulations governing special education programs for children with disabilities in Virginia, and School Board Policy, IGBA, local divisions must submit an annual plan and applications for the provision of special education and related services to eligible students with disabilities who reside in the jurisdiction as an agreement for implementing federal and state laws.
Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Jennings? Do I have a motion to approve the special education annual plan?
I make a motion, we approve the special education annual plan.
I have a motion by Ms. Kirby. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second by Dr. Mealy. Discussion.
No, Ms. Harrison.
Oh, I'm sorry. Masks are throwing me off.
Yeah.
Discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Annual plan's accepted. 3.03, Dr. Mealy.
Yes, this is just in reference to our meeting, I believe it was back in January. There was some confusion about what the board meant when we talked about student versus learner. And I believe it was Mr. Hill who just asked that we vote on this again. So I would like to make a motion that Bedford County Public Schools change from using the word learner or learners to exclusively using the word student or students when referring to all children and adolescents who attend any Bedford County public school. This includes any document, program, form, handbook, logo, theme, motto, slogan, emails, vision and mission statements, videos, strategic plans, verbal references, or written or electronic online documents, references, or communication of any kind via any format throughout the entire division. Any historical documents, folders, or forms already purchased may be used only until the current supplies are depleted, and no historical document need be replaced if already part of an existing file.
I have a motion by Dr. Mealy. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second by Ms. Hairston. Discussion? Yes, sir.
So you do realize the word learner is not a Dr. Shook term.
I never said it was.
I'm asking yes or no. So I'm just trying to understand what are we trying to accomplish by saying student versus learner?
Well, I think we went all over that in January.
I'm asking again, so I'd like to hear it.
I'm just going to stand by what we said in January. I don't think I need to, it was a very long explanation.
So we're all saying that higher education using the term learner and the trend around learner is not what we want to do in Bedford County. Is that what I'm hearing?
You're hearing exactly what was written in the motion and referring to the minutes of the January meeting.
So you're not answering my question. But
I'm just saying we don't need to discuss
So
this
I just
again.
want to make sure, that we as a board understand this is not a Dr. Doug Shook term. It's used in higher education. It's used in other school systems and divisions to express that learner is long-time learning, meaning whether you're in K through 12 or in college or in a workforce, you're still learning. But it's obvious that, we want to go back and say student, which means your learning ends at K through 12. But I just want to make sure it's documented. This is not a Dr. Shook word or term that it's used in higher education and other places. So I just want to make sure that we all document that.
Any other discussion?
Miss-
Yes,
Yes, sir, Dr.
Chairman. I'm the proverbial old dog who doesn't like new tricks, so I wasn't sure that I wanted to embrace the learner synonym for student, but after hearing Dr. Shook's eloquent reasoning for using the term a couple of meetings ago, I now like it. So I'm planning to use it along with student and pupil and maybe other synonyms as well. I think it's sad that with all the problems we're facing now with the pandemic and school closure, that we're wasting meeting time on such a trivial matter. I certainly don't want to be part of the, quote, speech police, unquote. I also think that we should let the superintendent and his staff do their jobs without micromanagement from school board members. We don't want potential superintendent applicants to think that that's the new normal for Bedford County schools.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say and let it be known that I have never thought that learner or student was anyone's word, particularly Dr. Shook.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Johnson?
I lose a lot of sleep lately about a lot of things, but what term someone is using to describe the children in a classroom is not one of them. I brought along this book tonight that I use and I actually have my own students at Virginia Tech read. It's called Becoming a Learner. I think it may have been misnamed. It was maybe supposed to be Becoming a Student, but there is a great chart on page 20 that I always emphasize every year, and it describes the difference between a student and a learner. And the term doesn't matter. I've heard from teachers recently that don't want speech codes imposed on them. I've heard from people in the community who, echo Dr. Hicks's sentiment that with everything going on in the world today, a discussion about learner versus student is like the least of anyone's concerns. So again, I go back to, I don't really care what term anyone uses. I would be open to letting people use the term that they feel most comfortable with. But I think the most important part is the philosophy behind the term. Student is someone who waits to be directed, who learns for the test, is externally motivated, avoids challenging situations, sees learning as an obligation, learns to do. Whereas a learner, they say, is someone who seeks out opportunities, learns for understanding, is internally motivated, seeks challenging situations, sees learning as an opportunity, and learns to learn. It's a mindset. Again, you can be a student and still display those qualities of being a learner. You could be a learner and still display those qualities of a student. But the key is giving our staff the freedom and the flexibility to operate their classrooms as the professionals that they are, with how they feel. And I was just wondering, we can all be learners and learn new things and be open. Growth mindset is very much a real phenomenon. But I just wondered if, Dr. Shook, have you heard any concerns from staff, or do you have anything that you might think should be considered before we vote on this?
Well, let me say, first of all, that I think the positions of the 7 board members have been made pretty clear. And I do apologize if our interpretation of the action you took in January did not meet what the board's intention was, or if I didn't articulate that well enough. That evening, we had a specific change to the strategic plan that was arguing for the term learner-centered for one of our goals. And you all were very clear that you wanted the term student there. A majority of you were. And so we did that. So I think we were all confused when this issue came back up. But let me say a few things. Of course, we are going to honor whatever decisions the board makes. But I guess hearing Dr. Mealy's motion, I'm a little bit concerned about any directive for the board that may violate any existing laws, including the right to free speech. And I'm kind of thinking about the enforceability of this. If someone were to use this term verbally or in writing, especially because we're getting press releases from the State Department of Education daily that has Virginia is for learners across the banner. And so I would recommend, before you go forward with this entire motion, and maybe this is related to 3.04, if we can get through that one, that before you complete that part of it, you at least check that with the attorneys so that we don't find ourselves tied up in situations that we don't wish to be in. And that's just, I had not heard the motion until tonight. I didn't know what the motion was going to be. In terms of written documents and all the other parts of the motion, I think that can be done almost immediately. Let me say this, though, because, as Mr. Johnson's talking, I'm thinking, and of course, we're going to talk about coronavirus here in a bit. One of the things I'm just going to share with all of you through all of the last few weeks is how much I have learned personally. And I shared this with the principals yesterday. I've tried so many new things and I've learned so many things that I consider myself a learner. And to Dr. Hicks's point, the thing that struck me the most when we first adopted this term was our adult learners, our employees, when we did our focus groups, who said they felt like that term was so engaging. And here are these folks out there delivering meals and doing all these things. And it's a recognition that learning is something that we do. And of course, we're focused on our young learners or our students or our pupils or whatever we choose to call them, young people. So that's my story. And again, that's probably not going to compel anybody for this decision. But I guess the second thing I would share, because we did bring up strategic plans, and I've said this to many of you individually, and I think I may have even said it in a previous board meeting, but I think I'd be remiss if I didn't share it again. The process for developing and revising our strategic plans, the major processes, have taken up to a year each time. We've done it 3 times during my time here, and it involves extensive and deliberate input from the community. And we actually have a core value in that strategic plan that says collaborate with staff, families, and the community to support learning. And so I guess I'm troubled by the fact that we would so quickly change something like a mission statement or a vision statement without going through that process. Now, certainly it's the board's right, and we'll respect whatever you all do. I guess I'm just asking you all to consider that, because we have worked hard as a staff, and I feel the board has as well, to be as collaborative as possible in all of our processes. I mean, if you talk to Dr. Mealy or Mr. Hill, we tried it on Monday with these attorney interviews, and I'm not sure we achieved, everyone agreeing on everything, but I think you all try to do that in everything you do. I think we as a staff try to do that in everything that we do. So I guess, Mr. Johnson, to your question, that's kind of what runs through my mind. But I suppose the most immediate concern I have is something that would prohibit free speech, starting with me, starting with the senior staff, but to our teachers, and to our families, especially because, to your point, Mr. Johnson, this term is becoming more and more commonplace with our state Department of Education. And I would hate to see Bedford County positioned in such a way that I don't believe is necessary. I think if you want to change the logo and the strategic plan and all of those things, and ask people to start trying to use that vernacular, certainly we'll try. I've started using the word student a lot more than I used to ever since January. And I think other staff have done that as well, but I haven't used it exclusively, like the motion would certainly suggest. So I think I've talked too long about this, and I do apologize for that. But yes, Mr. Johnson, and that's where I am on this.
Okay, and I would just say that, to Mr. Johnson's reference to his book, that is one author's opinion. I will tell you that I have had many constituents who have said that they don't like that term. When you talk about the Virginia is for Learners banner, if you look at anything on that page, or most anything, it refers to students. All their objectives are students will, students will, students will. What that logo means is they are trying to capture pre-K kids and anyone who is alive. So they're basically going from birth to death. With that, the reason they're using that particular motto, we'll call it. And I disagree with the author there that the word student indicates some sort of hierarchy, or that you're not learning any place. I think that's just an unreasonable assumption. As students, we are learning all the time. You don't have to be in a classroom. It doesn't define a hierarchy of any kind. It's a common term. It's in everything related to education. You look at just take the SOLs and the SOQs. There's no learner. It's students will do this. And it's just a common term that is much more relevant to the people who are in our buildings. Now, as far as, freedom of speech, I'm not telling teachers they can call their students whatever they like. So let me rephrase and say, I just think it's important that what we're doing, that it corresponds with everything else you're picking up. The Virginia Law Book does not mention learners. Okay, the SOQs don't mention learners. The SOLs don't mention learners. They mention students. So we should be in step with the state of Virginia. And when they change that, then we change it. But if you're concerned about limiting someone's freedom of speech, I can understand that. So we can withdraw, verbal,
Could I also, to your point, I don't disagree with anything you just said about what some of those state statutes say currently. But I would offer that even just this week, there was a task force in response to the coronavirus. And I don't know if Dr. Woodford wants to talk about that now, because we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves. But that task force, that statewide task force, has the term learner and learner-centered throughout it as the best way to respond. And again, not to replace or get rid of the word student. I think maybe you all are misunderstanding maybe my position or the staff's position on this. We're not suggesting there's anything wrong with the word student. What we are suggesting is that the word learner represents the future of education, and that the word student represents the past.
Well,
and
I totally
we're on
disagree
the
as well.
we'd like Bedford County to be future focused, as it appears and that's why our state is messaging on this, because you start messaging before you start changing SOQs and bylaws and all of those things. But again, you've heard me say this before.
Agreed. And if
Yeah.
we're going to message, then let the message come out. And at that time, when all of the documents that we use and we reference and the law and the Every Student Succeeds Act, when that is changed, absolutely revisit it.
So we don't want to be forward thinking.
I don't know that, what I'm saying is I disagree, and a lot of other people disagree with the author of that book, and in thinking
And many
about,
others,
I'm sorry?
and many other authors as well.
Yes, well, and I think you're going to find some on both sides. What I'm saying is, when you say that the word student is a past, represents the past, and you're only learning in a classroom, and a teacher is giving you this information, that's just unreasonable. That's not true. It's just a way to manipulate a word.
Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by
Oh,
saying aye.
wait a minute.
Wait, what?
So I thought there was a concern about putting it in there that teachers or whoever can't use that word.
Yes, I said,
Verbally.
we could go ahead and eliminate verbal
Did you restate that
references.
though as the
Okay.
motion?
Yeah, we need,
Okay,
Are you withdrawing your original motion, Dr. Mealy?
that's what I need to do, to read it again? I think
Okay.
so.
Dr. Mealy's withdrawn her original motion.
Yes, okay,
Are you going to make another motion?
yes.
Okay, would you make your motion, your restated motion?
I'd like to make a motion that Bedford County Public School change from using the word learner or learners to using the word student and students when referencing all children and adolescents who attend Bedford County Public Schools. This includes any documents, programs, forms, handbooks, logos, themes, mottos, slogan, mission statement, vision statement, videos, strategic plans, written or electronic online documents, references, or communication of any kind via any format effective immediately throughout the entire division. Any historical documents, folders, or forms already purchased may be used only until the current supplies are depleted, and no historical document need be replaced if already part of an existing file.
Do we have an amended motion? Do we have a second?
I second.
Second by Ms. Hairston. Further discussion? Yes, sir.
So on those videos that are mentioned in that, those videos, is that videos that are created by the staff or teachers? So again, aren't we then telling them what words they can use?
No, I don't think that we're doing that at all.
Well, that's what the motion just said, to include videos.
and I thought it said all communication.
Right.
I think it did.
So we're then telling them they can't
It-
use
it-
certain
again,
words.
I see where the votes are on here. I would be most comfortable if an attorney reviewed this so that we don't get ourselves in a place that we don't want to be. That's my personal
Yeah.
opinion.
Well,
Mealy?
Dr. Shook, I would have to, if I may,
Yes.
I would have to ask that you explain how you feel that this is a legal
I believe-
matter and that
Yeah,
there
sure.
would be some legality.
Well, again, I'm not an attorney. That's why I would defer to one on this. But I feel like anytime you say anything that goes to free speech and academic freedom, I don't know of any other time that I've served in any school district that I've ever heard of a board limiting a word unless it's some hate speech or something that's so repulsive.
Mm.
And I am concerned that we will have employees who may push back on this, and I'm trying to protect the board from doing anything that's going to cause controversy, especially in a time when this is where we don't really wish our employees' focus to be. And so the motion is very broad, even as you stated it. But I do believe in working with our attorneys, you could achieve what it is you're trying to achieve. I mean, it could be as simple as we run this by them and they give us a legal opinion. And that's just, again, you all vote how you want to vote. I have to state my concerns.
Absolutely. I personally think that if we were to poll teachers, and I have heard from many staff members, that we would find that a large majority, and I would venture to say a majority of teachers and other staff members support the student being used across the board. I struggle with the legality here at all. The word student has been used. The word learner has been used. We prefer student. To me, that centers on the direct instruction coming from a teacher to a student. And so I'm struggling with the legality piece of that at all. I question that.
Dr. Mealy, do you have any objection to withdrawing the motion at this time, pending legal review and assistance with crafting the motion?
No, I do not. I was going to say, since we're getting ready to vote on an attorney, I'm happy to do that. So I will withdraw this motion until we can present it to an attorney.
Okay, the motion's withdrawn. 3.04, School Board Attorney RFQ. Mr. Hagler, are you out there somewhere?
Yes, I am. For the board's instructions, we did issue an RFQ for attorneys. We had 5 firms respond to that RFQ. We did decide to bring all 5 of those in for interview process and did not eliminate any of them on the front end of that. We did conduct interviews with 2 board members, Dr. Mealy and Mr. Hill, and Dr. Shook, myself, Karen Woodford, Dr. Woodford, and Dr. Dewis were also present, and we interviewed those firms. And there was a lot of discussion, but I don't believe we actually came to a consensus. And so I'll turn it over to the board members that were present to provide their feedback to the rest of the board.
Ladies first. Dr. Mealy.
Okay. Well, why don't I talk about one and you talk about the other? Is that okay? Or is that okay? All right. I'm going to start with the firm that I preferred after sitting through this, which is Sands Anderson. They are a very large firm. They have been in, the people who would be working with us have been practicing school law for 27 years. They have been a VSBA lobbyist. What I really liked about both of these gentlemen, and there is a third person also in it, but what I really liked about it, these gentlemen, was one of them was a full-time school board lawyer in Hanover County, and the other individual was also involved with a school division. So as they pointed out to us, they have seen from the inside what it takes to be a school board attorney, and they really know more than someone who has not been on the inside. And that, in fact, they said that it was a critical piece of knowledge to have worked inside, and I tend to agree with them there. They are the largest local government attorney firm in the state of Virginia. They currently serve 25 to 30 school divisions, as well as helping with in-house legal for other counties, such as Hanover. Wade Anderson was born and raised in Botetourt County. They're married to teachers. Both have been teachers, and they speak regularly at the VSBA. They are, hold on just a second. They are have a lot of special ed training. They are do online teacher academies. They have any kind of training that you would want. All the firms said that they had training. They currently have 70 attorneys. They such as EEOC attorneys, tax attorneys, real estate attorneys, contract attorneys, HR attorneys, excuse me. They have said that they, and the checks that Dr. Shook and Dr. Woodford made said that they respond immediately to the needs of the division, and that's what the references did say. The question was asked of all the divisions. Actually, every division was asked the same question, but one was litigation. Do you prefer litigation or do you prefer to settle? They said they have to do what's in the best interest of their client. There are pros and cons. We help you make an informed decision. They are the sole sponsors of the summer conference for the VSBA. They are very capable of handling all SPED issues, and the references did support that. They have had a SPED issue, as a matter of fact, in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals that they presented. They just, to me, they are not on the list with Vacor, which is the insurance company, but they have represented that they have been used to represent that. Now, they have offices all over. Specifically, they have it in Richmond, Christiansburg, Fredericksburg, McLean, Durham, Williamsburg, and Williamsburg. They have a government group in this law firm. They collaborate with one another across their practices depending on their areas of expertise. I really liked that. I think it's important to have a lot of attorneys versus one or two, because in this day and age, you can't be an expert in everything. So being an expert in school law and having that school law team, I really liked that aspect of what they did. They were just I think they did a very professional presentation, and I just thought they were certainly number one on my list.
Mr. Hill?
Yeah, so absolutely agree with the things that Susan said about Sands and Anderson. Before I go into detail about the notes that I captured, and I don't know if this was captured on record, I know we agreed to issue the RFQ, but what were the main reasons that we were looking at an RFQ to move away from our current attorneys and we have two that handle, one handles SPED and then the other handles all other issues?
I don't know that it was looking towards the specific objective of moving away, because if I'm not mistaken, our current attorneys submitted an RFQ. Is that not true?
Yes.
Right. Yes.
Okay. So I don't see it as a trying to move away.
Okay.
I see it more as a, let's see what's out there.
Right. So were there things that we were looking for in particular with the group of attorneys that we met with? Meaning, were there things that the board was looking for specifically? Because I interviewed, we asked the same questions and we documented. So, looking at all four of them, I recommend. There's only one that I wouldn't come to the table and say, this person can do it. I just wanted to make sure I understood what we were looking for differently than what we currently have today. Because all of them offer the same thing based on what I've seen. When the one thing that I look at, because of everything that's going on and the fact that we've already been told from our board of supervisors, from a budget standpoint, not to look for, everything that we've asked for. So I want to keep in mind that dollars are important, not just now, but always. But the things that I looked at is you have attorneys that are ranging from $280 an hour to $450, as much as $450 an hour. To me, that's a big difference. Our current attorney, again, gave every answer and was in line with everything that the other four that I would come to the table to look at. Reed Smith, again, current attorney, could absolutely do everything that we asked about from both an employee and SPED perspective. Sands Anderson, again, and then Timberlake Smith. And Susan, I think that's the other one that where we were going back. You said two. So Sands Anderson and then Timberlake.
Mm-hmm.
The difference in those are our current attorney that we use for all other aspects outside of SPED, which used to be with Reed Smith, who was one of the firms, very comparable to every other law firm that we met with and interviewed. The thing about our current attorney is the hourly rate is the best price. And then it jumps to $10 more an hour. And then it jumps to $50 more, or excuse me, $100 $90 an hour. So, yeah, I just want to make
40.
sure we understand that where we are today from outside of SPED, we're getting the best bargain when it comes to those dollars. So anything outside of that, and I'm in agreement with Susan. I think Sands Anderson will do a great job. But from a pricing standpoint, I don't see a need to change from where we are currently with who's handling everything outside of SPED. Now, what I will tell you is our current fee for SPED, which is the Bedford County rate, and I take it it's fun to share these prices. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
I mean, Reed Smith was $450 an hour, which is what who we currently work with. And I should say as much as $450. It goes from $450 to $295, depending on who is handling the case. Versus Sands Anderson, who charges from $320 to $180 an hour. So again, dollars there, if you go from Reed Smith handling your SPED to Sands Anderson, you're saving a significant amount. But if you go from our current attorney to Sands Anderson, then you're increasing your hourly. So that's my concern.
Well, you wouldn't increase your hourly rate if you did your SPED through Sands Anderson, because you're going to lose. The cost of Reed
Yeah,
Smith.
definitely.
But
Definitely wouldn't increase.
right, but
for SPED.
also, but
SPED.
right, but Haney and Pack said that they're going to go to Reed Smith anyway.
Yeah, and so I guess I didn't make myself clear. So I'm absolutely fine with taking SPED from Reed Smith to Sands Anderson because it's a reduction in cost. Where I'm not comfortable is then taking all other aspects from $280 an hour to $320 an hour. That's an increase.
But it's going to be a wash by the time you finish with SPED. If you've reduced your cost in SPED, but you've increased your cost in general legal fees, it would be, it's going to be pretty much a wash there. You might even
It would be
come out
wash,
a little
but we could
better.
even go a step further for our taxpayers and save money.
Well, and I think, as I said at the interview, you get what you pay for. I have not found Haney and Pack to be entirely reliable with the legal advice that we've received on numerous occasions. So I am concerned about that. When I, as a director, have to go look up something and then call somebody back and say, this is how I'm reading that. How are you reading it? And they go, well, yeah. Plus, the whole situation with the first hearing on the Whitehurst case was very disturbing. The lead attorney, Haney, arrived extraordinarily late, no phone call, nothing. The clerk of the court didn't know where they were. The judge got upset. She had not filed the correct paperwork on time, and it wasn't even like a day late. It was many days late, and the judge admonished her and fined her. That was very eye-opening to me in terms of, do we want someone like that representing us? And that was part of my reason for wanting to look at what else might be out there, because I just wasn't thrilled. I had concerns over the firm that we were using.
So Dr. Shook, I would ask you from a staff perspective, have you guys had any issues with our current attorney and how they're representing us to justify going from $280 an hour to $320 an hour?
Well, I guess those are two different questions. I would say in general, we are very comfortable with the service we get from Reed Smith for SPED and from Haney Fino on the non-SPED issues. And we've had a long-standing relationship with both of them. Having said that, and you all heard me say this, I was blown away by the quality of the presentations. I totally concur with Mr. Hill and Dr. Mealy that 4 of the 5, including the current, I think stand shoulder to shoulder with each other in terms of reputation across the state. And then that was even validated for the ones we don't currently work with, Sands Anderson and Timberlake Smith, in terms of the references we got from both the superintendents that I spoke to and the special ed directors that Dr. Woodford spoke to. So we, as a staff, we could fully support any but the one that our entire interview group decided should not even be for consideration. And the price points do vary. Reed Smith is very expensive. They are. And so I guess I can tell you, although it would be a transition for us to move away from them in SPED, Dr. Woodford and I have talked and agreed that based on these references, we're very comfortable with Sands Anderson or Timberlake Smith on the SPED. And we also see the wisdom, if the board does, in having one firm do all of it. The superintendents I spoke to for both of those firms had them doing everything, and that seemed to make a lot of sense to them. And it makes a lot of sense to me. And again, that's not saying I'm recommending we go away from our current attorneys. I can fully support working with them. Again, we have a long track record, but I think the price points are different. And I think during our discussion yesterday with the references and even on Monday, I don't see personally big degrees of separation between those 4 firms. And so if money is the factor, and if we want to be with one firm, I think Timberlake Smith would be probably the most logical to proceed. But I'd love to work with Sands Anderson too, and I think all of our staff would, or Timberlake Smith, or the other 2. I guess what I'm trying to say to you, Mr. Hill, and to the board is I don't think you can go wrong here. But your point about price may be something to consider. I mean, when you look at the clients that Sands Anderson serves, there are many larger districts, and even some of the smaller ones they service are what I would call better funded districts. And when you look at who Timberlake Smith serves, they are generally smaller districts up to our size, and ones whose funding is not maybe where those who Sands Anderson was. And I'm not judging other districts. All districts have different ways. So again, I'm not trying to be wishy-washy, Mr. Hill. You asked a good question, but the staff will be comfortable with whichever direction the board goes. And I think I need to point out, and we even talked about this yesterday, you all taking action tonight is extremely appropriate because of how you approach this, and I think it's a very objective process, but it is not required under Virginia procurement law. When we started with Reed Smith and then switched to Haney Fino later, that did not require board action. It did not require RFQs. It did not require interviews. And in talking to many of my colleagues around the state, very few of them have done this process. So I think the fact that you all have done that is great. But my point in saying all this is, if we were to select one of these attorneys, and after a period of time we were not happy with their services, board, staff, SPED, HR, whatever, at any time we can go to any other attorney and say, we'd like your help with this. In fact, one of the things that the interviews brought out, I thought, was that a number of these attorneys do specialty work for school districts. They're not their general counsel or what I believe you all are seeking here, but that's because all attorneys want to give the best advice. And some of that advice is that it's beyond their particular skill set or specialty. And so they would encourage to reach out. And I think that was the challenge, quite honestly, with the one firm, was that they didn't have a lot of general counsel experience. They only had a bit of specialty work with school districts. Good attorneys, I wouldn't say they're not. It's just the fit didn't seem to be as strong. I'm sorry, that's probably way more of an answer than you wanted. But
And I'll just add too that the firms that walked away from Reed Smith to go to either Timberlake or Sands were both happy. They did not regret leaving Reed Smith.
Anybody have any Questions? Mr. Johnson?
Chairman, I have a couple of questions. One, Sands Anderson, I know I'm familiar with Reed Smith. And and Timberlake, are they all Richmond-based firms or?
Timberlake is out of Stanton.
Right.
Okay.
And Sands Anderson has 4 or 5 locations. The closest one is Christiansburg. But the attorneys that would serve us
Education is out of Richmond.
would be out of Richmond.
Yeah, they have 3 attorneys. We only met 2 of them, but I got outstanding references on the 3rd one that we didn't see. And the same is true for Timberlake Smith. We only met with 1 attorney, but I got outstanding on the 2nd person in their firm that works with education.
Okay. And my second question is, what is our objective tonight? Would we be signing some sort of retainer with this firm, or would this just be the firm that Dr. Shook and staff would contact if a legal issue arose?
I think, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think our purpose is to decide which law firm we now want to use. So I would expect then that whatever way we vote, that Mr. Hagler would then notify whomever to let them know that we would like to engage their services.
Okay.
And my suggestion would be, again, I don't think even the attorneys would advise any type of contract or retainer. They just don't operate that way. But if it's the board's desire that anything new that comes our way, we would immediately turn over to the new attorneys. Anything existing, we would have to work on a transition plan. We wouldn't want to do anything that would jeopardize any current work that either on the SPED side or the general side that we had support. And I believe all these attorneys would work together to make that transition smooth. They get that.
We did. We asked them that very question. They would say things such as, well, I'd like to meet with you and, the staff and then the board and find out what legal issues are on our plate and how we have to move forward with this transition. And they all said, it could be immediate. That was fine. That nobody said, well, it might take weeks or whatever. They were all said they were ready to begin supporting us immediately.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I have a question for Dr. Shook. I'm just curious in terms of if we got input from our special education supervisor or any of Mrs. Staten or Mrs. Jennings regarding just their thoughts on the current attorney and, and the ones that we are considering. So did they give any input?
Well, they were not on the interview panel.
Mhm.
Dr. Woodford represented, because that's part of her team.
Mhm.
I do believe she consulted with them. But Dr. Woodford, do you want to chime in and speak to Ms. Hairston's question? Because I think it's a good one.
Yes. So that question was asked the other day as far as our special education attorneys. We are very happy with them. Reed Smith does a wonderful job for us and are very responsive. But it's hard to compare because we haven't worked with these other firms. We're not unhappy with Reed Smith at all.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Ms. Kirby.
If we do decide to vote on someone tonight, then would they, and I'm just clarifying, and I think we just covered it, and I must have been spaced now a little bit, but they're going to be for matters going forward. Then would we keep the current ones to finish out what is pending?
That would be our intent where it would make sense, because if, say, there's a personnel issue that currently Haney Fino is working with us on, and that's already in process, or say there's a due process or a special ed case that Reed Smith has already started with us on, our intent would be to see that to the finish line with them, inform the new attorneys that we're, and as anything new comes along the way, which it will, unfortunately, that would all be turned over. And it may be even in that transition. I don't want to say it's all, black and white in this issue. There may be existing things that could be easily transitioned to the new attorneys. I can tell you, again, we want to honor what the board would do. My personal perspective is if we're going to go with new attorneys, we need to get them involved with as many things and get up to speed on as many things as soon as possible, because I don't want the staff to have to worry about in each particular instance, okay, which attorney are we supposed to call now? I really want it all to go to whoever is the next attorney. I think that's a best practice.
I agree with you partially. I don't think we need to switch attorneys or horses midstream
Agreed. Yes.
on significant
Yes,
things. However, I don't see any problem with bringing a new law firm in to make them knowledgeable about what's going on
Sure.
while allowing the existing attorneys to complete whatever litigation's going on.
Right. Yeah. And
That
again,
makes
I think if it's litigation, that's for sure. We would not want to switch into that, especially if it's, something assigned by the insurance company or something of that nature. I was just kind of suggesting that the sooner we get them up to speed, the more comfortable we will all be, because there will be a transition. They're going to, react differently and respond differently. And we do have key staff that depend on these attorneys on a regular basis, especially human resources with personnel matters, and special ed, obviously, with those matters. But there are others as well, and includes the board. So, yeah.
You have another question,
The
Mr.
other question I asked, did Sands Anderson specifically, or did anybody ask them if they would require a retainer? Do they do? Because I know a lot of firms do require retainers.
Yeah,
It wasn't in the RFQ.
it wasn't in the RFQs. In fact, I think the only one that had that, which surprised me, was Haney, since Haney doesn't have a retainer now. But I think they were the only ones.
And insurance would cover Sands Anderson or the other ones if we needed to?
Well, that's a good question, Ms. Kirby. Actually, and this is something you need to consider as well. At the rates of Sands Anderson, they are likely not going to ever be selected to represent us in any litigation assigned by the insurance company. And the same was true for Reed Smith because of their rates. And so that is something for you to consider. That did happen to us in two previous litigations that I can recall, where we wanted Reed Smith to represent us because they had been advising us up until the point. But once the insurance company stepped in, they assigned outside counsel, and we had no say in who that individual or firm was. Now, I think we got good representation from those firms, but I think, again, you work with an attorney and you get a comfort level with them, and you would like to do that. And so I don't think we'll get that with Sands Anderson. I did ask that of Timberlake Smith because their rates are a little bit lower. And they didn't indicate that they'd done any work for our current insurance carrier, but that they felt like their rates were in the range that they could. Again, from my perspective, that should not be the be all and end all of what you all decide. But I do think it is a factor. And again, that's because your insurance only pays to a certain rate, and there's only certain attorneys that are going to work for that rate, and Sands Anderson won't, and Reed Smith won't.
Was that specifically addressed during the interview process, whether or not any of the law firms would negotiate rates with an insurance carrier?
I don't know that we pressed into that point. No. Our previous experience tells us that they won't, that they, and I think this is another distinguishing point, and I'm not saying it as a positive or a negative with Reed Smith and Sands Anderson. They are larger firms. In Reed Smith's case, they're an international firm. And I would say Sands Anderson, what'd you call them? Like a mid-size? They have like 70 attorneys or something like that, where Reed Smith has like 2,500 or something like that. And I think in those large firms, they're kind of partnership ownership groups have a lot to say about the rates that they charge, because that's just part of their business model. And I don't judge it. It feels like the Haney Finos, the very small, and the slightly larger Timberlake Smith, they don't have those issues because what is Timberlake Smith, like 7 attorneys? Do you all remember?
I can take it in just a second.
6. So they're smaller and
school law and 4 in government.
Yeah, and of course our current ones are only 2, and so that is something we could ask them, but my suspicion is they would not agree to that, because I just don't think they typically do that.
Any other questions? Comments? All right, do I have a motion to recommend a acceptance of a specific RFQ from a specific law firm?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a recommendation that we accept Haney Fino as our attorney that handles all except for SPED, and then Sands Anderson to handle SPED.
I have a motion for Haney Fino to handle all issues, all legal issues except for SPED, with Sands Anderson handling the special education issues. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Johnson. Further discussion?
I think the fact that Haney Fino is acceptable to the insurance company really helps set that firm apart for me. It's kind of to the point that Dr. Shook was making. Once you establish that relationship with the attorney, I believe I remember one of those cases a few years ago when we got used to that person and then we got handed off to a new attorney and had to explain the whole situation. So that's why I would certainly lean in that direction.
Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
No.
Ms. Johnson, poll the board, please, ma'am.
Ms. Harrison, your acceptance of the motion to accept Haney as the attorney and Sands Anderson as the SPED attorney?
Nay.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Hicks, Dr. Hicks,
Nay.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mrs. Kirby,
No.
Mr. Leamy,
No.
and Dr. Mealy.
No.
We have 3 in favor, 4 opposed.
Is that right?
2 in
I
favor.
think it was,
No.
think it was 5-2.
Mr.
5-2.
Dr. Hicks.
Dr. Hicks.
Dr.
Voted
Hicks
no.
was no. Okay, the motion does not pass.
5-2.
Do I have another motion to accept a request for qualifications from a specific law firm?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to recommend that Sands Anderson be our attorney for everything, and that we see how that works out. If we're unhappy, then we can always move to something else.
A motion from Dr. Mealy, Sands Anderson handles all. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second by Ms. Hairston. Discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Ms. Johnson, poll the board, please, ma'am.
Yes.
Dr. Hicks,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
To be in agreement with the board to show solidarity, I will say yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mrs. Kirby,
Yes.
Mr. Leamy,
Yes.
Dr. Mealy,
Yes.
all are in favor.
The RFQ from Sands Anderson is accepted. 3.05, Dr. Mealy, update to school board bylaws.
Yes, this 2 seconds here. I'm just remain concerned about the fact that we have a document that's 39 years old that we're working from, that has Bedford listed as a city and people in it that don't have anything to do with the board anymore. And I absolutely agree with Mr. Johnson about going to the VSBA. I think that was a great idea. What I'm asking tonight is, do you think it's reasonable for us to just accept the document we have for now until this COVID passes over and we can, go to the VSBA? I'm not saying not go to them at all. I'm just saying the document we have is 39 years old and completely out of date. But I don't want to not go to the VSBA. I just think we need a document in place that is up to date. And we can separate the agreement from the superintendent, between the superintendent and the board, from that, just the main document that's just updated bylaws until we can meet with the VSBA.
Comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman, did you have a chance to reach out to VSBA to inquire about the board retreat?
No.
And I know the world fell apart like a week
Yeah,
after
it
that
did.
meeting, but yeah.
And that played a major role in my lack of following through with that action. But here's something I would throw out there for consideration now that we do have an attorney. That could be one of their first tasks, is to review the old document compared to what we have now, the draft document, and then make, substantive recommendations regarding tweaking the revised copy. Does that make sense? And then to Dr. Mealy's point, once we've got that document that's gone through legal review, then we can sit down with VSBA and say, hey, here's what we got. What do you think? Does that sound like a logical course of action?
Fine, I just think we need to move away from that 39-year-old document.
Well, I'm in total agreement with you. I mean, this could be one of their Sands Anderson's first.
And please understand, I don't care what anybody changes or anything. That's not, you can change whatever you want. I don't care. I just think we need a new document
Great.
as soon as possible.
Well, that's two items we can throw their way immediately. So I think that's, and we can try to get a response by our May meeting.
Okay.
And then you guys can decide how well you think they did with it.
3.06 Fun at Bat program, Mrs. Kirby.
I just think that the presentation we got last month, enabling the kids to get free baseball, softball equipment in the elementary schools, especially now since it's free, I just want to ensure that that's going to be initiated, and so we can get it going. And hopefully when things are back to normal next year, PE teachers will have that in line.
There's no fine print involved in this, or?
Not that I'm aware of.
I thought the information had already been shared with the principal, so what action are we looking for?
I just wanted to make sure we ensured that it was going to be done.
Oh, okay.
So it would become a countywide mandate as opposed to individual schools choosing to adopt it if they wanted.
I don't see why we couldn't. I mean,
Why we couldn't do a
free.
countywide mandate?
I don't know that we want
Why would we mandate it?
to, I think what we need to do is make it available. We talked
Exactly.
about the lacrosse thing. I mean, we talked about
Yep. They'll withdraw it.
why we don't want to jam lacrosse down another school's throat. However, by the same token, we want to make it available to them should they decide that that's something that they want to participate in. I think we should do the same thing with this rather than
Yep.
the mandating.
I withdraw.
But I mean, just to be clear, this is something that we are implementing or offering up to individual schools. Is that correct?
And I don't want to misspeak, but is some staff member out there, my understanding is that we either are going to soon or already have forwarded that information out to the schools. Can someone speak to
Dr.
that?
Shook, this is Karen.
Yeah, go ahead.
We have already sent that information out to all of the elementary schools with the links and information for principals to order the equipment and look into the program.
Thank you.
Next
Mr.
item.
Chairman,
Yes.
this Fun at Bat program is an option that PE teachers can use if they so desire. It's not something that we are requiring them to use, is it?
Correct. Is that not, Ms. Kirby? Is that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yes, it's
Okay.
not mandated. You will do this during phys ed. It is an option for them to utilize during phys ed.
All right, thank you.
Okay, comments from the board? Dr. Mealy?
Yes. I visited the meal distribution, several different meal distribution sites, and thanks to all the nutrition workers and staff and everybody that's working so hard to get the kids fed. Clearly, people were thrilled at, having access to their meals. So thanks to everybody for that. It was really very heartwarming to see people drive up and be so thankful to have a meal. And I visited the ladies who were making the meals and thanked them profusely for all their work, and that goes to everybody, the principals I saw, the teachers, the staff, everyone. I will say, and I know that we're in an unprecedented situation, so I will just say that that kind of is a caveat, I guess, to my my comments. I've heard from so many parents. I've even heard from some students about the current situation with our learning plan. They're very confused. They're frustrated. They're complaining that, and maybe I shouldn't say complaining, they're making us aware that they are drowning sometimes in emails. I had one parent who said, I have a child at a middle school and a child at a high school, and right now I'm sitting on 75 emails from every teacher, from the principal, from the division, and they're just a little bit overwhelmed by that. And again, I do understand this is an unprecedented situation. Everybody's trying to feel their way through. Just a comment so that you all can be aware that parents are like, I don't even know what to do. There's so many emails. Another complaint I'm getting is that, and maybe I shouldn't call it a complaint, a concern, because every parent that has contacted me has said, I want to do this. I want to do what's right for my child. I definitely will do whatever the school asks me to do. But I had a woman 2 nights ago who said, I don't know what to do. My child is in a Google Classroom. This is an algebra class. Is in a Google Classroom. There were quite a few assignments. And I've spoken to so many people, so I think this one said there were 27 different assignments. But so they started to do them, and this person does have a pretty good math background. So they started to look at it, but one of the problems was one of the assignments was a 14-page assignment. And the parent said, but it's all PDF, so you can't really do anything with what they want you to do on the page because it's PDF. You can't print it because it's on the Chromebook. She said, I can't get into the Google Classroom via my computer. So she said, it's just really a lot. And she said, plus, if I had to print it, she said, you're talking about me printing just for this one assignment, 14 pages, and then rescanning those so I can send them back to the teacher to be assessed. So just as we move forward, just think about some of those things that were, that might be a problem for the students, because I'm not getting anyone who says, I don't want to do this, and I'm sick of this, and they're off from school. They're all just wanting to help their children. And I know I referred one, I think yesterday or the day before, to Dr. Woodford, who was even suggesting, do I need to homeschool my child? So I think we just need to keep that in mind as we're moving forward to make sure we're not drowning them in emails, and that we're making sure that the assignments can be done. And I don't think anybody did it. Please, I want to make absolutely sure. I don't think any teacher is doing this knowingly or whatever. This is just that unprecedented situation we're trying to work through. But those are some things that I've been hearing about pretty regularly, just the overwhelming emails and the ability to actually get the work done.
Ms. Harrison?
I'd like to echo what Dr. Mealy said in terms of just traveling and visiting various schools and actually seeing firsthand the teachers, the nutrition staff, and all of them working so diligently for our students to provide them with meals and preparing lessons and various things like that for the students. So I just want the teachers to know, along with the support staff and our bus drivers, the transportation department, nutrition, just really everyone, from the very bottom of my heart, I am so very much appreciative for all of the hard work and your efforts during these very unprecedented times that you've pulled together, and you're putting the students first, as you always do during this time. And you're doing it in such a compassionate and diligent manner. And I just want to say thank you. And to our parents, wow, I can't say enough about the parents. I've received so many phone calls and text messages from our parents. They are working so hard. They recognize they're not teachers, and but yet, they're doing their very best to try to keep their students, their children on par and working hard. And so I want to just applaud the parents as well. One of the areas that I certainly have talked to members of the executive staff regarding this last stretch of our school year, the fact that many of those SOLs certainly have not been introduced. And so when we look at trying to measure the children's competency with those particular SOLs, it does concern me. I am especially pleased to know that there is a potential for us, if we can get past this virus, of providing a summer program for our students. And so I would say to the executive staff and to parents as well, if we're able to offer this service, then I would really encourage you strongly to allow your children to participate. It concerns me greatly, those young elementary children, and even our middle and high school children, regression that I believe certainly can potentially occur. And then the other area that I wanted to talk about was that I had an opportunity as the school board representative to meet the other members of the Lowell Schools Board. We did this telecommuting, Zoom, and so we talked a little bit about just the staff compensation, just continuing that, and we all agree that they should be compensated and their salaries should continue. I just wish everyone be safe out there, take care of yourselves. Thank you.
I just want to echo what Dr. Mealy and Ms. Harrison have said. Just thank you to everyone who has stepped up to the plate. This is amazing, and I'm just going to ask parents out there to hug your children just a little bit tighter. I pray for everyone's safety.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Recently, I received an email from Mr. Mark Levy. He's the director of the Roanoke Valley Governor's School, and he wanted to reassure us that all of our Bedford County students who are currently at Roanoke Valley Governor's School are still receiving daily instruction, just like it's a regularly scheduled class, all virtually, and they have had 99% attendance so far. So our Gov School students are still getting the full RVGS experience. I'm not sure how much time that leaves them for laundry and crocheting at the end of the day, but they are at least getting that time in. And as I've been thinking about everything going on in our world today, as people my age often do, I think back to Mr. Fred Rogers. He was a frequent visitor in my home growing up, and I still look to him for wisdom. And there was a quote that I think is really appropriate for this particular moment in our history. He said, "When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, 'Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping.'" We are, as my colleagues before me have said, in very unprecedented times. I think probably the last time we've experienced something like this was well over a century ago. So a new situation requires us to think differently and act differently. Now isn't the time for politics, but for leadership and for us to become the helpers that our kids and the community need and deserve. And as I look around the county, we've seen that every day. The staff that's working so hard on the feeding program, the bus drivers, the teachers, the paras, the librarians, everyone that's signing up for shifts, risking their own health and safety to make sure that our kids can continue to eat nutritious meals throughout this. The administrative team who worked very hard on no notice from the governor's office to begin assembling a program that could distribute food over the course a county the size of Bedford, the 5th largest geographic county in our state, and did that very well. The teachers who are following instructions from our State Department of Education. Virginia's a Dillon rule state. When Richmond says you have to do X, then we have to do X at the local level. They developed that continuity of learning plan, and they've been working very hard to provide high quality learning materials so that the children can continue, and hopefully those learning gaps are not as deep as they would otherwise be if they had 5 months. If we think about the summer slide and the loss of learning that can occur after just 3 months, imagine 5 months of sitting at home with no academic enrichment whatsoever. So to our teachers, our principals, everyone that's working so hard on those programs, thank you. We appreciate the work that you're doing. You are making a difference in the lives of children. And it is not unnoticed and unappreciated. It's one of these times where thank you almost seems to be insufficient considering the way everyone is stepping up. So I just wanted to say to all of our BCPS family, thank you for what you're doing. We appreciate you. We love you. Stay safe. And we look forward to seeing you in the future when we don't have to wear these masks for our safety and others.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Yeah, so not to sound like a broken record, but I have to take an opportunity to say thank you to our learners, our teachers, and our staff. And you know, it's great to watch our teachers and staff make the best out of what's going on. You know, I appreciate those that are, one, out serving food, two, riding those buses and the vans and making really our students' day. And, you know, seeing the excitement that they're sharing. So, you know, I really appreciate all that's taking place in making the food distribution, whether it's at a pickup site or either being dropped off. So to those teachers and staff that are out there doing that and sharing and making sure the students still feel included and having that interaction, I really appreciate that. What I would say to our learners is, you know, thank you for making the best of an awkward situation. You know, you've really had to change your game of being home all day. You know, yes, you can be outside, but really not having that interaction per se face to face. But what I'm most proud of is, you know, those that have been able to grasp technology and do FaceTime with their friends or Zoom with their friends. I know TikTok is really big at my house and slinging arms and whatever it's called. But, you know, they're making a change, you know, to make sure they keep that interaction with their peers. And that's important. And so, you know, I say that in the fact that, yes, they're having fun and they're keeping up with their peers, but they're also using it for other things. And so, you know, my kids have been, you know, the teachers have made sure they're putting assignments out on Google Classroom, making sure they're giving them a window to sign in, to have interaction with that teacher. And so I really appreciate that. You know, I would have to say, you know, a lot of students go, well, you know, it's not being graded or it's not, you know, mandatory. But thank you to those that have really kept that learning aspect up to want to be prepared for what's coming in the fall, because hopefully it's coming in the fall. You know, I would remind, you know, not only us sitting around the table, but those who are watching and listening, we still have students that are in class. You know, our CVCC students, our juniors and seniors, I think you mentioned Gov School, dual enrollment. So those kids have really stepped up as well, and have, you know, while others are kind of enjoying, hey, my year's over or my senior year's over, we've still got learners out there that are doing class, turning in assignments, trying to hit that GPA for secondary or, you know, for next step in education. So, one thing that I would mention to the staff, and I know we haven't said it's not going to happen, but I would really like to see us, you know, let our seniors know. And I know you talked about it today, which, by the way, that was a great video, you know, that was posted. You know, and I know we said that graduations haven't been canceled, that they're still pending for May, but I would really like to come up with the message of, you know what, it may not happen in May, but if it takes until December, we're going to recognize you and have that. There's a lot of kids, yes, we've ended their year early, but they need that recognition. And so I don't care if it's in May, June, or December, we need to make something happen for that group of kids.
Agreed. Absolutely.
So that's all I have. So, thank you.
There's actually nothing that I can add that hasn't already been said here. And, you know, I agree with everything I've heard here tonight, this evening. I especially want to recognize the staff for being willing and able to step outside their lanes and take on new roles that they weren't necessarily ever expected to fulfill. You guys, you're killing it. Keep up the good work. Your efforts are definitely recognized, not only by everyone in this room, but by everyone in Bedford County. So just keep it up. And, you know, it's demonstrative of what Bedford County is, your accomplishments and what you're doing on a daily basis. So just keep up the good work. And to Mr. Hill's point, yes, we need to offer the opportunity for a graduation. You know, depending upon how people's lives progress following the end of this epidemic, you know, some may be able to attend, some may not. Some may want to do it virtually, but we do need to have a graduation ceremony in some form or fashion for our seniors.
Absolutely.
So,
And Mr. Chairman, can I just add
Yes,
one
ma'am.
more thing? We all have said what a great job our teachers and staff and have done, from, you know, principals and senior staff to our custodians and everyone. I think it would be, not everyone is watching this. I think it would be really nice if we could write a letter as a board thanking all staff and recognizing them, so that everybody can hear what we said here tonight, and in written form at least.
Oh, absolutely.
I'd be happy to work on a letter to send out to all of you, and you could add something to it. Would that be okay?
I'm good with it.
Don't forget Dr. Hicks.
Dr. Hicks, oh, I'm sorry. You sit right next, I guess technically you're still sitting right next to me. I just can't see you. I apologize for skipping over you. You're up.
Well, I'd just like to echo what everybody else said and say kudos to Dr. Shook and his staff and all the teachers and paras and nutrition and transportation workers for the tremendous job that they've done over the last 3 weeks. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, so it's okay if you want me to
Sure.
do a draft, and I'll just send it out and you all make whatever corrections or
Yep.
whatever you'd like.
Rock on.
Okay.
Dr. Shook, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know we're running a little bit long, but we thought it was important as a staff to share with you and any in the public that are tuning in, just kind of the latest updates. And some of this you already know from the emails we've sent or the web postings or some of the other communications that we've put out. And before I lose this train of thought, because several of you referenced it, if you weren't able to watch the broadcast that went today, I really encourage you to do that. It was really a good opportunity to hear, not just from our high school principals, but our 3 senior class presidents, who said things much better than any adult could say. And I guess they are young adults, so we should give them that. But what I would also share is we try to keep those videos to a certain time just for people's attention span. And I did keep those 6 guests on the line probably about another 10, 15 minutes to specifically ask them their thoughts about graduation. And there was consensus among that group that even though they've read about drive-throughs and virtuals and all kinds of other ideas, and they weren't dismissing those, that group would like to do a large gathering, graduation, even if it has to be at a later date, even if it can't be on the same day for all schools, even if it can't be at the same location that we've always used, and even with the understanding, as some of you have said, that the attendance by staff and by the graduates may not be what it historically would have been. They just think that's important. And we even threw out some ideas that we had heard about, well, could we do it at homecoming or Thanksgiving or one of these holidays? And they all said, if we have to, fine. But they prefer to do it at the first possible moment we can, because their feeling was the farther away we get from the awarding of when they actually, are graduates, the less participation there will be, the less energy there will be. So I thought that was great input, and the 3 high school principals are committed to that, and the 3 class presidents are committed to that too. And they're important because they got to get their classmates to come to this thing. if we have it. So I appreciate that you all feel the same way. So this is our first time to meet before the governor, or since the governor's order rather. And so I want to make sure that you all know, and again, if you've heard me in various venues, it's a repeat, but I think it's important to understand, even though we are an educational institution, I see first and foremost us as being a community agency and a major one. And I think we all have responsibility collectively to encourage and give hope to our community. You've all said that in your own ways, and I think those seniors said that on the video and others. So that's what I'm going to keep asking of our leadership and of our staff, and that's what I see happening. And I just couldn't be happier with the response from our staff and from our community, as you all have said. I do want you to know, and many of you know this because we've been talking a lot, that I feel very fortunate that at least twice a week for the last few weeks, we are getting regular updates from the state superintendent discussing many, many issues. And if you don't think that's happening, I would encourage you to visit the Virginia Department of Education's frequently asked questions page, which now reads like a dissertation, because anytime one of the 132 of us asks a question, an answer pops up either immediately or in the next couple of days as something comes up that they didn't think about and they want to be responsive to. We've also been fortunate that one of those calls we were joined by the governor and feel good about his unapologetic defense of the safety of the citizens of the Commonwealth and asking us to join him in that effort, which we've done, but also that he's sorry that he's done this to the schools because he knows how they are a fabric of our community. We've heard the same thing from Secretary Carney, our state secretary of education, and others. In addition to that, our regional superintendents group, which is about 20 of us in the region, we have a standing weekly meeting. And so that's just kind of me on two venues. And I feel like I'm on Zoom or Hangouts all day now. And most of our staff and most of our citizens are saying the same thing. But I want to let you know that other staff are also collaborating. You know, Mr. Hagler is out there talking to other finance people, and we're talking to HR people, and we're talking to instructional and special ed. And in many ways, this crisis has brought many of us closer to those communities than we were before, because we don't feel like we have a choice. And so I just want to reassure you that any of the things that we're doing, decisions that we're not making them in a vacuum. We are consulting with our state. We are consulting with our colleagues. We may not do exactly what everybody else is doing the same way, but we are trying to understand where other people are. And the same message keeps coming through and through with that. Nobody really has a playbook for this. And so we are all comforted by listening to what others are doing, successes, failures, and everything kind of in between. So let me say this before I turn it over to three staff members who are going to speak and then answer your questions if you have them, because you may. And you've had a chance to ask us questions individually, but not as a group. And I think that's important tonight. So let me just tell you what they're going to talk about so you can, if you're making any notes or anything, and then I'll turn it over to them. So Dr. Dewis is going to start by talking first about meal distribution and then also about capital and maintenance projects, which I think is an important topic during this time. Dr. Woodford is then going to talk about the childcare that we're currently offering to some of our first responders and healthcare workers in the area and what that looks like, and the broader topic of the continuity of learning. And you may have to cut some of these people off because it's a lot of information and they'll understand if you want them to stop. And then Mr. Hagler is going to talk about employee issues, and he's going to specifically ask you about one thing related to COVID-19 and health insurance where he's going in a certain direction, but wants to make sure that you all can support that direction or push him in a different one if need be. And also a policy that did not anticipate this circumstance, and that is one that pays out employees who have X number of sick days or less from a certain fund. And Mr. Hagler is also going to talk about how we probably need to rethink that, because I don't think the letter of that policy meets the spirit of the current circumstances. And then maybe something that's on all of our minds amidst all of this is the current year fiscal 2020 budget through June 30th and its status, and also the fiscal year 2021 budget. And just for a preview of that, I don't want to say we're starting over, but I don't think we're being realistic if we think your preliminary budget is something that the state and county revenues are going to be able to support based on what we've heard so far. But he'll talk about more about kind of what we know at this point and what we don't know. So they invite your questions throughout, and I've at least asked them, like each one of them, like Dr. Dewis, when he finishes his segment, that he would at least pause and ask if you all have questions about his areas, if that's acceptable, Mr. Chairman. Is that?
Yes.
Okay. So Dr. Dewis, without further ado, could you jump in and start your segment?
Thank you. Yes, the first thing I'd like to just update the board about is our current meal distribution program. Yesterday, we distributed meals to over 3,700 young people in our county. That's everyone from toddlers up to those age 18 who are out there, either coming by our 9 feeding sites or coming out to a bus stop that is near their home. We're operating lots of buses and vehicles to make that work. That those meals include both lunch and breakfast at the same time for the most part. And so the total meal count is up nearly to 7,500 a day. We have pretty enthusiastic staff help, and we're trying to rotate staff and find fill-ins when needed, when issues come up, whether that's just to keep it balanced among staff, or whether specific needs come up for staff members. We've been fortunate to have lots who have stepped in to assist. This meal, the plan is to continue to distribute meals next week, which was our spring break on paper. But of course, that spring break means something pretty different in the current circumstances, and needs in the community don't change just because that was adopted on the calendar for this year. So meal distribution will continue next week. We have made some changes in our processes over time. We're now asking those who are interacting with the public in the program to try to wear a cloth or other mask, gloves, keep social distancing as much as possible, and to wash their hands or use hand sanitizer as much as they can. And we've begun to do that this week. And we're continuing to watch what the Center for Disease Control and the Virginia Health Department recommendations are about safe practice. And if those guidelines or restrictions get tighter, and that has an effect on our staff numbers, or then we'll have to, of course, make some changes in our model. Or if we run into food supply issues, the trucking industry, you may have seen stories about in the news, but food supplies, supplies of other types of materials that go into this effort could be restricted. They're not so far, and so we're in pretty good shape, and we think we're in good shape going into next week, but we're going to keep watching that too. And like you've seen other districts do around us, by scaling back daily deliveries or modifying their pickup sites, we may need to do that in the future. So we're not planning to do that right now, but we'll watch these other factors. And so the other thing I'd like to talk about are just some projects going on in our county right now. Some of which we're able to accelerate a little bit because of the school closure. One of those is to try to get an earlier start. We hope we can get about a month earlier start on the repair of the Big Island sewage pipe that needs repair. We're also going to get a little bit of a head start on some typical summer cleaning in our buildings, and so that's going to help, especially as we stagger and modify work schedules and watch social distancing for our maintenance and custodial staff. So we're looking forward to that. And in a recent email, I also indicated that another of the projects we were planning to accelerate somewhat was the was the replacement of the original building carpet at Forest Middle School with tile throughout the building. And that had been a project that had been on our capital improvement plan for a number of years and not funded yet. But through owner direct purchasing, as Mr. Burge from Skanska has been telling us every month, we've been able to save some money throughout the project. That's actually a little more than the amount of money this project would cost. So at the last meeting, getting the go-ahead from the board, we went ahead and got some quotes on that work. We've identified that was the company with the lowest quoted price. And in working with Jamerson Lewis, who is the general contractor at the Forest Middle School addition, have decided that in order to make sure the timing of that work and the accountability for getting that work done right and on time is there, that Jamerson Lewis would actually take responsibility for that. So we didn't come back tonight with specific bids for you to approve, because Jamerson Lewis has its own procurement process and rules, and we've already gotten the quotes to identify the best price. So as I emailed to you about that, Dr. Mealy emailed back concerned that we would be moving forward with that. And so I wanted to definitely make sure to bring that up for the board to give us some clear direction on tonight, because if that's going to be done even in the summer, we need to move forward. The company needs to order materials, and we need to get that work going. So, the idea was to use the savings from the owner direct purchase process and replace the flooring, the original 25-year-old carpet in Forest Middle School throughout the building with tile and primarily. And so if there are thoughts from board members about that project, yay or nay, we just need to know tonight so we can either have that scheduled or put it off as we have been doing for a number of years.
Dr. Dewis, this is Dr. Mealy, and when we had talked, my only concern is, and I just wanted to kind of bring it to the board to just think about, is that I know when I went out, visited the school with Marcus, Mr. Hill last year, that one of the big issues was the fact that Forest Middle needed, the old building needed a new HVAC system. And I'm concerned about how we're going to, and all I'm being told is that, we're kind of holding it together with duct tape, so to speak. But it has to be replaced. And I'm understanding that's around $1 million, somewhere in that area. And I'm just concerned, you also said in that phone call that there would be money left over in this project. And I'm just wondering if we can use whatever savings we have, or how the board feels, to work on getting that HVAC system. While I realize the carpets do need to be replaced at some time, they're not actually coming up and stuff like that. I just want those kids to have that HVAC system as well, and I'm just concerned about where that money might come from to do that. So that's why I was asking about it, because between the contingency fund right now and that you're looking at about $300,000 toward that HVAC system that they desperately need. And I've never been involved in a building project at this level, so please understand I'm speaking from a point of view where I don't have a lot of knowledge about this. But, even looking at other budgets that we have there, and please, I don't want anybody to get upset. I'm trying to just think about an air conditioning system. Is there any money we can possibly take out of the furniture or the technology budget for that school, or how can we do that? That's my concern, because it was quite warm when I was there with Mr. Hill that day, and I'm just concerned about, suppose it just completely goes, where are we going to get the money to do that, or how do we do that to help these kids?
Right. That That's a great point. I think any of us would prioritize an HVAC system or an aging roof over carpet generally as a need in a building. This just wasn't going to be nearly an amount of money, basically a seventh or an eighth of the amount of money we'd need for an HVAC system. And, but it could accomplish one part of that work that had to be cut out of the initial scope of the project because of how much was budgeted for it. And so we definitely could set aside that money. It would take a while to set aside that money and others to get to the amount for that building's HVAC replacement. The furniture has already been ordered for the building within the budget that's allotted for it, and as has most of the technology. And so there may be a little bit of, we may have spent a little bit under what had been allotted, but nothing in the scope of getting to $1 million. That's why we placed that on the list when we had the joint meeting with the county, so that we would have a committed, reliable source of funds for not just that, but the roof, as well as painting and the carpet in the building. And that wasn't included in the original scope of the project. We also have big needs for HVAC systems at Big Island and Forest Elementary, with Montvale not far behind. And so that's why we tried to accelerate that on the CIP list when we met with them earlier in the year. We just haven't had a commitment to provide that reliable source of funding for a regular program of just really system replacement, which as they wear out. So.
Right, do you have any idea how much money we might have left from this project? I mean, could we throw that in there to possibly come up with that money that's needed?
Based on, I do anticipate a little bit of the remaining contingency may be needed as we get into the final civil work with soils outside the building with the roadway and parking lot. We found that there was a lot of, or a considerable amount of unsuitable soil from fill from the original project that had to have been dug out and replaced. So that's eaten into the contingency, as Tim Birch has told us over the months. But and we may have a little bit more of that. I do think there'll be some of that contingency left. This has been a well-managed project, and I do think that owner direct purchase has been an added amount of money that we've been able to save, and that may top out around $200,000 is what I'm thinking. So that would get us about a third of the way there, potentially for this particular HVAC replacement.
And I'm speaking to anybody at this point on the board or staff. So what do we do if that, it comes, I don't know, September and it's done? There's nothing we can do about it.
So
I would just say we would, in order to move forward with the HVAC system, it's probably looking at to be a next summer project, because it has to be designed and then bid and move forward. And so we'd have to come up with the $700,000 or $800,000 we need, pending any inflationary pressure that it's hard to know in this economy what we'd be seeing on bids for that. But we need to come up with that, and I don't know where that would come from. But if a source is identified, we certainly could move forward on it.
What's the
We
value?
included it on that CIP list.
What's the value of the contingency currently?
141, I think.
It's about,
141,972.
about 100 and, I will look at that, just one moment.
I think it's
Your
141.
email stated $141,972.
Thank you. That was the figure I was looking for, Ms. Kirby. Yeah,
And
about
what's-
a little over 140,000, right?
And what's you said you think that the owner direct purchasing savings will top out at 200K. What are they at right now?
That
177.
sits right now at a little over 177,000.
So we've got some room there. Now, how bad is this HVAC system? I mean, is it functional, or
didn't we replace one the one where we went to the band room, wasn't that one replaced, Mike?
We did replace a unit back in the rear part of the building where the music rooms are. Yes, had to spend about $25,000 or so to do that, just to keep that going. And we've also had failure in other parts of the building. The controls basically don't work. We're leaving the system on, and so we can't just get new controls because they won't talk to the existing equipment. So it's 25-year-old HVAC equipment, and it's functioning for now. And generally, we can patch it and keep it going for a little while. We've had some uncomfortable weeks though in that building in various parts of it. Most notably, probably a couple years ago, right as school was starting, in one whole wing.
So, I mean, what's the plan going forward to keep that thing going?
Well, we work with Honeywell.
Slap Band-Aids on it, or?
Yeah, Honeywell can use HVAC Band-Aids, I guess. That is what we're doing. We're coming in and troubleshooting, whether that's our technicians or Honeywell doing some of that work, and then making repairs as we need to. We're probably going to need to replace these units at $25,000-$30,000 a piece as they fail piecemeal going forward. If there is that kind of failure, that takes sometimes a month to do, or 6 weeks, 8 weeks to get that in and on. And then when it is time to replace the whole system, are those going to be compatible or not? We don't know. So it's kind of, I worry about spending money that way on it, just because I'm not sure it's the best investment long term. I mean,
Are you talking about replacements of rooftop units? I know you mentioned the controls, but
yeah, rooftop units, compressors, those are the things we've had to replace.
okay. Now, can we not replace the control system and install sensors compatible with that control system?
That's not what Honeywell has told us. We're not able to really go in and just replace the control system because of the age of the units. They're just not, they don't talk to one another.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you could find a control system with and install compatible sensors with that, then I'll talk to you about that offline.
Okay.
Dr.
We
Duas.
certainly would look for any creative way to keep it going if you don't have the money to replace the whole system.
Dr. Duas, this is Georgia Ariston. I have a question about Big Island. I know we're talking about Forest Middle School right now, but you did mention that Big Island Elementary School, their HVAC also is in need of replacement. So I'm just curious, have we had any problems with that unit breaking down or anything like that this year or previous year?
We have from time to time in previous years had to have parts of it down, and we tried to let one part of the building compensate for the other and kind of bypass certain features. The technicians know how to set that up sometimes, but both at there and at Forest Elementary, there have definitely been some uncomfortable stretches for periods of time until those repairs have been made.
So then you would say that those two schools really should, are top on the list and should have priority with replacement?
Yeah, all three of those really are really at the top of our list. Forest Middle, Big Island, Forest Elementary, at the top of the list, with Montvale not far behind that. And I think you saw that reflected in the CIP priority list that we compiled and reviewed back in the fall and shared with the supervisors in January.
Well, I see a functional, reliable HVAC unit as a must-have. I see flooring as a nice-to-have, personally. And I would rather fence that money with the intent of applying it towards replacing the HVAC unit. That just makes the most sense to me.
So Matt, couple questions. How much was the quote for the flooring?
It's in the ballpark of about 150 to 60,000.
Okay. And then question would be, if we set aside this money, does it have to be spent by December, or can we put it in a budget for air conditioning?
That's what I was wondering.
The funding is from a bond issue, so there are stipulations on how you have to spend that down by a certain deadline. I don't have that in front of me, and it has to be spent on capital projects, so I'd have to touch base with the county and
Yeah, we need that answered.
someone's local.
Because I don't want to
It
get that
depends
money
if they pull this,
I don't
the
know.
remaining money is being
I
pulled down
think
from
it's better
bond or
spent
from
on
local
HVAC.
money
Oh,
being
I
put into
agree.
this.
We just
So
don't have a
we may have some flexibility
Right.
that we don't have to spend it right away.
Okay, can you find out?
I'll have to check in that.
Yeah, could you find out what when the drop date is on that, the spend down date?
If it's local money, there is no must drop dead date. If it's funding that they're still pulling down from the bond issue, there will be, if
Okay.
they haven't pulled it all down already. I would imagine they've already pulled all the bond issue down, and now it's local money at this point,
Okay,
at the end of this project.
can you
So, but
confirm?
I'll confirm that and let you know.
Thank you.
No, thank you. That,
Anybody else have any questions for Dr. Dewis? Okay, thank you, Dr. Dewis.
Well, I just want to be clear to make sure I know. So we'll tell our folks to shelve the flooring replacement. Is that the consensus?
Yes.
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 I think so.
All right. And one thing I will say just about flooring, there's going to be some minor modification in the library with some walls as well as some of the shelving as part of the project that's built in to the scope. And for that reason, the library is carpeted currently. That carpet, we are going to need to do something with the carpet just in that room because it's going to get torn up and it's going to be part of it be exposed because of some of the renovation work. And so one part of that 150 or 60,000 that I talked to you about is to replace the library carpet with another type of carpet tile. They're the same material we used at Liberty Middle in the office and library areas. And I think if we don't do that, we're really going to have a very noticeable issue there where there will be some fraying and other problems with it going down the road.
Now, did you, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I don't have the exact amount of that, but that was one portion of that 150, 60,000, one, fraction of that. And so I do worry that the project will be really noticeally incomplete if we don't do the flooring in that room in the library.
Okay, so that was not included in the original scope of work then?
If the carpet was not.
The library carpet specifically?
It probably should have been. It was one of those value reductions that we made, to get to budget at bid time.
Didn't work. Can you get us a cost on that?
Yeah.
Please?
I
On that
can.
On that
I can
particular
do that,
aspect
and
of
I
the
can-
carpet?
Yes, I can do just the library, the cost of just the library. But I will say that I feel like if we wait until the next board meeting to approve that, we'll probably have missed our window for ordering and getting labor lined up. So, yeah, but I certainly can get that to you maybe even as early as tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments for Dr. Lewis? Anyone?
On that hearing that he said, if we can't approve is there a ballpark that the board would be willing to say, if it hits this particular dollar amount, move forward with it?
Do you have a swag, a guess, estimate on what? Because here's what we're trying to do. We don't want that to be unfinished. However, we need to have a rough estimation on what that's going to cost before we approve you to move forward with that. Is there any way that?
Let me see if over the next little bit in the meeting I can hunt that number down.
Okay.
And maybe if there's a way to pop in after Mr. Hagler at the end, I can do that.
Yeah, if they can just give us a ballpark to work with, then I think we can make something happen.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Woodford, you ready for your portion?
I am. So I'm going to talk about two areas in our department, and that's childcare for first responders and then our continuity of learning plan. So first with childcare, on March the 19th, led by Beth Robertson and Patricia Knox, we began to explore the possibility of provision of childcare services for essential community first responder personnel, such as the fire department, law enforcement, hospital, nursing home, and some of our own essential personnel who were bus drivers, nutrition workers, to offer childcare services since school had been closed. And then during the week of the 23rd of March, the team worked closely with the Department of Social Services, schools, and staff to prepare for the opening of 3 childcare sites. They were Goodview Elementary, Bedford Elementary, and New London Academy. Guidance for operating a childcare facility under pandemic conditions was written and staffing was arranged, classrooms were set up, and registration for children occurred. And on Monday, March the 30th, New London Academy and Bedford Elementary were opened as childcare facilities for emergency first responders. At this time, we have not had a registration need at Goodview Elementary. We've been able to work with all of our families for our New London and Bedford locations. Currently, the sites are open for operation 5 days a week from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and are manned by staff, including nurses, teachers, and paraprofessionals, and even some of our office personnel. Custodians are on site and they clean the classrooms, bathrooms, eating areas, and playground equipment continuously throughout the day. At our Bedford Elementary site, we currently are servicing 25 registered children with a daily attendance generally between 15 and 19 children based on family work schedules. And we have about 22 staff divided over 2 shifts, one a 6 a.m. to noon shift, and then a second group coming in from noon to 6 in the evening. New London Academy currently has 11 registered children, and most of them attend regularly Monday through Friday. And we have approximately 18 staff members, again, divided over 2 shifts, working there. Just so you know, we do have some pretty stringent protocols in place to ensure staff and child safety. We do have question screening and temperature screening for all children and staff when they arrive each day. And parents are not allowed any farther than the front lobby to prevent contact with anyone inside the building. Children are immediately instructed to wash their hands when they enter the building. We keep our room spaces out of the normal flow of traffic areas. That's also a feeding site, so we're very careful of keeping that very separate from our childcare area. Meals are provided in the rooms, and children are given instruction on hand washing procedures, preventative cough covering, social distancing, and we're also providing social stories for these children on COVID-19 as we think probably some anxiety for some of our older children, knowing that their parents are first responders and that this is a very difficult time for them and a new environment. We don't cross expose groups. The groups that are assigned stay together every day, all day. We don't mix groups to avoid cross-contamination if that were to happen. If any children show any physical signs of sickness, they're immediately taken to an isolated area for pickup. And we store all of their materials in a private personal storage area to maintain things separately. Just so you know, we also have a very specific schedule throughout the day. especially with playground, as the playground equipment is actually cleaned in between groups of students going out to it, again, to just ensure that we're not spreading anything. We also have hand sanitizer, and staff are working with students and planning activities that encourage social distancing and being very healthy in their social interactions. We've gotten much appreciative feedback from our first responders, as this has really been helpful for them as they are trying to continue to work through this pandemic. So moving to the continuity of learning, the first group of students I'd like to talk about are our 2020 graduating seniors. All of our seniors have been contacted by the schools, and they know that at this point, if they were passing the class or course at the time of the school closure, that they are complete with any coursework and don't have anything else to do moving forward, and that they are going to graduate on time, and there are no problems. For any student who was not passing a course at the time that school closed on March the 13th, those students are being allowed to do makeup work to bring their final grade up to a passing score. And just so everyone knows, no student will end the school year with a grade lower than their average when they left school. Our goal is to help all seniors complete their coursework successfully and graduate on time, and teachers are committed to working with seniors to achieve that goal. With some of the flexibility we were given with locally verified credits, we have a very small group of students that we're working with in our senior group that we are working to get to graduate on time. For all of our learners attending CVCC Early College and participating in dual enrollment courses, they will complete the required coursework in order to receive the college credit. Teachers are working with families to ensure they do have access to the coursework online or by paper if needed. Our governor schools have asked students to complete their work through online options, and they are working directly with families to facilitate this. Students currently in AP courses will be given the option to take the AP exam. The College Board sets the schedule for this AP exam and gives the exam, and they have told us that they're going to allow students to take the test at home on specific test days, beginning in April, extending through May. All of our AP teachers have reached out to all of our AP students to determine if they have the technology and the Wi-Fi connection to take the test at home. And if not, arrangements will be made to assist these families in any way we can that don't have that connection, so they will be able to take those AP tests to receive credit for college. The next group of learners in grades K through 11 I'd like to talk about. Our teachers have been working diligently to identify content that's essential for success in their future coursework and grade levels. Teachers are developing learning opportunities that address this content and to minimize the gaps in learning. Because our aim is to ensure equitable access to learning for all students, these learning opportunities will be made available in online and other formats, including packets and materials on flash drives, and an extended summer school options, remediation opportunities during the summer, and possibly into the next school year, and possibly even into next summer, making sure that we work diligently to close any learning gaps that may occur over the next few months. For students with internet access, links are posted on teacher web pages. That started this past Monday. Teachers began to make contact with students and families last week to not only check on them and their well-being, but to determine internet availability and the best format to deliver the learning opportunities to each student. For students without internet access at home, there are several options. First, the free public Wi-Fi can be accessed in parking lots of all Bedford County Public Libraries and Bedford County Public Schools. Students and parents have been reminded to remain in their vehicles to ensure their safety by not gathering together. Second, USB flash drives have been ordered and learning packets are being mailed or given to any student that expresses a need for that. Flash drives are we're currently downloading materials onto them. And if parents need, we are mailing them the week of April the 20th. For anyone who's requested them, and included in that is a self-addressed stamped envelope, so those flash drives can be returned when students are ready for new material or if they need feedback on anything. I appreciate Dr. Mealy's comments about some of the issues parents may be having. I think in this new online environment, our teachers are learning just like our students are learning. And so I would encourage parents to reach out to principals or teachers so we can make adjustments if things are overwhelming or things are unable to be downloaded, so we can make some adjustments for learners so that we can meet the needs of all of our students. In addition, the Virginia Department of Education has made the following resources available to educators throughout the state. Virtual Virginia, which is an online learning system for grades 6 through 12, will be free to students and teachers. Teachers will be able to share content in the Virtual Virginia platform with students for any areas of student weakness or any area of content that needs to be taught. The Virginia Learns Anywhere document was created by the Virginia Department of Education Continuity for Learning Task Force, and that document is a support for teachers in the use of instructional models that contain innovative approaches for teaching during this time. They include approaches that are learner-centered, teacher-centered, and hybrid models of those. And then lastly, the Virginia Department of Education has also created Virginia TV classrooms to provide instruction to students in grades K through 10 who are unable to access other distant learning options due to lack of high-speed internet. The Virginia TV Classroom will air instructional content from 1 to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday on PBS television. K-3 instruction airs from 1 to 2 with standards of learning aligned content provided by public media. And grade 7 through 10 instruction airs from 2 to 3 with SOL aligned content that's focused on earth science and algebra 1. During the week of April the 27th, PBS will be airing a special hour from 3 to 4 called AP Prep Week with content provided by Virtual Virginia focusing on a different AP subject each day. And that hour will include 2 30-minute segments. We do recognize the limitations of non-face-to-face interactions with our youngest learners and their teachers. We are encouraging parents to continue with reading and math activities at this time, and also encouraging time for families to focus on their physical and mental wellness during this pandemic. In an effort to stay connected with students, many teachers and staff members are recording videos, reading to students, writing special notes, and calling homes. We're working with Sheriff Mike Miller and several of his deputies who are reading books for kids and making videos to link to our website for students to access during this time. While we don't know when schools will open again for staff and students, we are beginning to think about our recovery plans. Focus on a robust summer session or an early recovery session will be needed for many students to close the gaps that may occur during this time. And as we move closer to the end of this crisis and are able to make plans for the reopening of our schools, we will definitely share more information about our recovery of learning efforts. Just so you know, you probably have already heard, the SOL administration of all SOL tests for spring 2020 has been canceled, and schools have been given the flexibility to award verified credits for students who were in SOL credit courses. In looking at our grading, we're looking at guidance from the Virginia Department of Education, and they have suggested that learning opportunities not be graded in the traditional sense. Instead, as students make progress, teachers are going to review their work, provide feedback. Students currently failing at this point in any course will be provided the opportunity to meet course requirements and obtain course credit. We're currently working with our department and the technology department with PowerSchool to determine the easiest way to average grades for the year and determine the best way to show learning for the rest of the year to students and parents in a more standards-based effort. In special education, we have been provided with a lot of flexibility from the Virginia Department of Education with regulations and requirements. However, deadlines for special education, IEP meetings, eligibility meetings, 504 and SET meetings still have to be met on time. The Special Education Department is working closely with families and school staff to hold virtual meetings or meetings by phone. One issue we are having is sharing draft IEPs and draft reports with parents to have during the meeting. Currently, we have a policy, GAB-IIBEA, which is the Acceptable Computer Use by Adults Policy, which prohibits staff from sending any personal or confidential student information through email. I would like to ask the board tonight to temporarily suspend the prohibition on sending student information through email related to IEP, SET, 504, or eligibility meetings as an attachment just during this closure, and only if a parent gives consent for that transmission through email. In closing, I know that new experiences such as these create anxiety, confusion, and frustration. And I want you to know that our teachers, our administrators, support personnel, and central office staff remain committed to doing what is best for our students as we prioritize the health and wellness and the learning of our students. And I appreciate your ongoing support as we work to do this in an effective and meaningful way. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And if you could let me know as a board, if you feel okay with suspending the policy just temporarily during the school closure so that we can transmit special education information to parents with their permission.
Let's address, before we move into questions, let's address that first and
I have a question before I can say
Okay.
yes or no.
Go for it.
I want to make sure that any file that would be sent would be protected if someone were to FOIA any emails going back and forth. I want to make sure that information would not be available.
Yes, any student information sent through email is protected by FOIA and FERPA, so we would not have to release any of that if someone FOIA'd information.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Chairman, I have one question. Dr. Woodford, are there other divisions that you know of that have implemented this suspension of regulations for the IEPs? Any of the neighboring counties?
I have not talked to anybody else. What we did is we looked at our federal regulations that permit special education documents to be sent by email if the parent gives permission. We, in our acceptable use policy, have discouraged that, and so it's really our own policy that's keeping us from doing it, not a special education regulation. But I've not spoken to anyone else to see if they're having that issue.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Dr. Shook, does this require, is consensus sufficient for this?
Long as our new clerk will make sure to record it in the minutes. I don't think it requires a vote at this point because we're temporarily. If you all were going to make a permanent change to your policy, I will say there's probably lots of policies that on their next review are going to have clauses about long-term closures and maybe not pandemics, but they just didn't. Mr. Hagler is going to talk to you about another one here in a few minutes, and it's just, yeah, that would be helpful.
Does anybody have any other comments or questions as it relates to suspension of policy? Is everyone okay with it? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Dr. Hibbs. Out of sight, out of mind. I apologize. So yeah, yes, Dr. Woodford, there's consensus to suspend that part of the policy or that policy.
Thank you very much. That will be very helpful to our team as we move forward. Are there any other questions for me?
Dr. Woodford, I do have one additional question. It's regarding
Yes, ma'am.
the competency directors and how ways in which they are supporting and helping the teachers. And of course, I'm just thinking once again about the new SOLs. We're in that fourth quarter, and new SOLs are being, introduced or haven't been introduced to the students because of this COVID virus and all. But I'm just wondering what the competency directors, what roles are they playing? How are they supporting the teachers?
So our competency-based designers are working with any teachers. They have been sending out email communication and reaching out to principals to let them know that they are willing to work with any teacher who would like to look at curriculum and design activities that would cover multiple standards and competencies at one time. They, throughout the year, have been creating project-based learning activities that they share out with principals and teachers And so they have offered their help. We had a call with principals yesterday. They were on it, again, offering their help to anyone who needed them, to help them create content, to help them create activities, to support them with communication with parents, and again, checking off those competencies and standards that still need to be met for the end of the year. So they're really designing curriculum as teachers request it.
And are you finding that teachers are reaching out to them, to our competency directors? I mean, are they directly reaching out and asking for this help?
Mm-hmm. So throughout the year, they have been working with teachers who have been trying to do more competency-based learning in their classrooms. And so they were creating activities throughout the year. And so I think we're finding that those teachers are definitely reaching out and collaborating with them. Not so much every teacher in the school division, but they definitely are staying busy with teachers that are wanting to do more project-based learning during this time compared to, just automating worksheets and things like that. So they're definitely very, very busy and creating lots of content.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Woodford, this is Dr. Mealy. I'm just going to ask these questions because they are some of the questions that have come to me. And again, I would say that parents are absolutely so grateful for everything that the staff and the teachers are doing, and they recognize everybody's working hard, and it's very appreciated, as you heard from all of us on the board, but also by our community. So I have this question quite frequently, and I think it's arising because there's confusion over the verbiage that's out there. But I have people who are continually asking, okay, my child is going to do this. It's not graded. But I'm going to still ask my child to do this. What about so I'm going to assume that my child passes this course. What about, and as a board member, I'm also asking, what about the students who are not rising to the occasion and doing that? How are we getting hold of those kids to make sure that they're not losing out on the instruction that they should be getting and the work that they should be getting?
Right. So that's a great question. And we have been working with principals to make sure we're communicating that effectively. We have asked principals to have teachers to identify the content that still needs to be taught, and to keep records of if students are able to complete the work, if they understand the concept, basically looking at a system of, yes, the students understand the content, or no, they don't understand it yet. We recognize the fact that not all students are going to be successful during the school closure just strictly by sending packets or online resources. So what we're asking teachers to do is to keep track of the students who are participating, who are able to do the work online, or who are returning packets. And then students who have not been successful during this time, or who we feel like need some additional help or some work face-to-face with content. As soon as school opens back up to the public and we can start programs, whether that's June, July, whenever, we are going to immediately start a very robust session face-to-face for students who need to have that content with a teacher in the classroom. I think we'll find some of our students can master that content and move on. Some of them may have already had it. A lot of our schools spend a lot of time after spring break reviewing for SOL tests, so some don't have as much content as others. I think we do recognize our younger children in elementary school. Probably a lot of them are going to need some face-to-face time with us, several weeks. Again, a pretty robust session as soon as school is opened back up. We are talking every few days about how we monitor what students are doing during this time, how they're understanding. And I think that's why probably some parents feel like we're over communicating, because that's really been our instruction to our staff, is to communicate and talk to families, make sure families know what's out there. So, that parents know what's out there. So we definitely are watching that, and we know that what we're doing now is not the only thing that will be done, that we will be doing some very robust instruction as soon as schools are open to the public again.
Okay, and when you speak about contacting families, is there some sort of standard that we're all doing? Are some people emailing? Are some people calling? Is there some standardization to how we're doing that? Or is it just really left up to the teacher?
We have not mandated a specific standard. We've left that up to the building principal, as we do even when school is open. I think there are some classes, if I'm a teacher of 20, I could probably make phone calls. If I'm teaching 125 students at middle or high school, email might be a better venue so that they can reach everyone at the same time. I know there have been call outs. I know that teachers have concerns about, not only are they reaching out, but the counselors are reaching out. So we've not required, we've asked that there be at least weekly communication in some format.
Okay, thank you. And one more question. Since, as Ms. Harrison said, no one has started this fourth quarter. No one got to begin the fourth quarter. Is there any equity in terms of, let's pick a grade, let's just say fifth grade, but you could pick any content area you want. But so nobody's started fourth quarter. Was there any work done with looking at what we felt as a division across those fifth grade teachers, or across the biology class, again, just any content area, of what we thought was most important to be working on, so that we're all kind of moving in the same direction? That doesn't mean the same lesson or anything like that, but just, for example, let me think. In fifth grade math, it's pretty important to know how to add and subtract mixed numbers with unlike denominators. So, you might want to say, that's a really important skill to have, but given the time and the circumstances in this unprecedented situation, maybe the work that we would normally do around the standard and metric measurements are not as important. Or have we just left that up to the teachers? Because I guess what I'm thinking is, when kids come back, are we going to have kids at different places because teachers decided what was more important more individually, or are we looking at it more globally, saying, all fifth grade teachers, in any way you want to do it, should be looking at completing these SOLs. The others, will catch up on or something. Does that make sense?
So we did talk about that, and we actually felt like our teachers had a better handle on that than just a few of us here in the instruction department making those decisions for teachers. We felt like they would go much farther than we could go if we just picked what we thought they had left. As you know, classrooms sometimes are moving at different paces. A classroom in one school and a different school may be a few weeks different.
Right.
The other thing we felt was really important was that students who had not mastered content before the closure on March 13th, just like teachers do every day in their classroom, there were probably remedial lessons that needed to be offered to those individual students and not everyone globally. So we talked and decided, and really I personally felt that was really the principal's purview to do what they do every day, which is monitor the curriculum in their schools, and to trust the teachers as professionals to make those decisions for their classroom and their content.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Dr. Woodford?
Yes.
Couple of questions for you. I've received some feedback from different members of the community And I was curious, do we have a timeline by which SPED teachers will be reaching out to their students?
Mhm. I hope that they reached out the case managers or the gen ed teachers. What we've asked our special education teachers to do is work closely with the general education teachers to make sure accommodations are being met. And so that should have occurred this week.
Okay, great.
And I would encourage, if parents are reaching out to you, if that's not occurring, for them to contact the principal or the teachers. We have found that a lot of our phone numbers and a lot of our emails that we have from parents in our systems are not working, or they're disconnected. And so some of those teachers are actually reaching out through mail to basically say, we don't have updated phone numbers, or things are disconnected, and so please call us or email. So I know that some of that communication is also happening.
Okay, thanks. That brought up another question, but I'll come back to that. My other point is, I know this is a really bad situation in many ways, but in some ways it also feels really energizing in that kids are now learning for the sake of learning, as opposed to maybe trying to earn that A. I know some of my students will come up to me and they're wonderful people, but what do I need to do to make sure I get that A? Well, now they're actually learning the content for the sake of learning the content, and I think that's great. And I applaud your team for some of the efforts that you've done to try to make that intrinsic motivation happen. My question that was prompted by the other comment was, for families, is InfoSnap still open? Like, can they go in and make sure that their email addresses and phone numbers are up to date or current, or is there a way for families to check that?
There have been call outs to parents to basically say, if you're not receiving an email from us, what principals did was they sent an email to every family saying they were doing an email test. And if that wasn't received, a call out went out and asked them to call and update information. Parents can't go in and do that manually. We have to do that. So that's why we've asked parents to reach out to us. And if we haven't been able to get them on the phone, I know a lot of teachers have been putting in updated emails. Then that's why we did the letters asking them to reach out to us. We even had, I will say, we've had a couple of principals actually do wellness checks and go out to the homes to try to get that information so we can make sure we're communicating.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Michelle, do you have any questions? No. Dr. Woodford, I just had a couple of questions, and you may have covered these already. At the child care centers, Bedford Elementary and New London, we do have nurses there, I assume?
Yes, sir. We have nurses on site all day.
Okay, excellent. And then roughly, well, how many seniors countywide do we have in jeopardy of not achieving graduation criteria? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't know. Dr. Francis is on the line. I know we've been asking for an updated list, and he may have that number. I could definitely get that for you. It's typically a report that we do send to the board as we get closer to graduation. Some of our principals were waiting because we actually awarded locally verified credits today, and that is a team here looking specifically at what students still needed to graduate and making sure they met the requirements to get their verified credit for their diploma. So those lists may be coming in the next few days. I know that what principals shared with us as they were making those phone calls, that they had very few they had to make. And again, Dr. Francis is on the other line. Maybe he might know better than I.
Well, if you could just shoot me an email, that was more a curiosity question than anything on my part.
Okay, we'll do that.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Anyone have anything else for Dr. Woodford?
No.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Woodford. You guys
Thank you.
keep getting it. Mr. Hagler.
I'll let Dr. Duisco here. He has an update from the earlier discussion.
Okay, great.
I was able to get the information that Mr. Leamy asked about. I estimate all in that carpet in the library is no more than $35,000.
Okay.
to get the old out, put the new in.
Is that a not to exceed figure?
Yes, I think that's plenty to get the job done.
Okay. Is everybody good with that to finish the
Yeah.
library? Yeah. Everyone, okay. Yeah, we're good with that as long as it's not to exceed 35,000.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Agler.
All righty. Try to get to the issues as quickly as I can here. First of all, from an HR perspective and all the senior staff, executive staff here, trying to make sure all of our employees stay informed on things that are impacting them. And I'm sure on their mind is pay and benefits and things regarding to that. We have sent out several emails to all employees, briefing them on any questions they may have. And sometimes in emails you can't address everything, so we did put contact information in there saying if you have any concerns, any questions regarding anything, please contact an HR representative in your zone, and we'll get back to you as quickly as possible. So we just wanted to make sure that our employees knew that HR is up and running and here to assist them with any questions or concerns they may have. Along in the email, we addressed some things in regards to work expectations, spring break next week, and other issues as far as clocking in and leave time. So we're trying to be comprehensive in those emails, but sometimes you just can't get everything in one document. So that's what we're trying to do to make sure we address, and as we hear different questions come up, we'll send out additional emails to make sure we address those. Concern on quite a few people's mind, and I've received questions on this, and my other finance directors are, what's the impact of this year's budget and also next year's? Well, let me speak to the this year's budget first. On a revenue standpoint, my biggest concern is really the impact of sales tax that comes into us, and also the lottery funding. I have no updates on how those are performing, but those monies are given as they come in. It's not guaranteed money. So I think May and June, I'm a little bit worried about the revenues situation on those two particular items. That's not a substantial part of the budget, but it is part of the budget, and I need to watch that. So the hard part about that is I probably won't know until we get to June, and we only have 1 month left. So we are considering, and there's natural some savings in our budget this year because we're not operating everything at full capacity. There will be electrical savings, fuel savings, because we're not running buses on our normal routes. We are running some. There'll be, water, waste, and professional development. So there will be natural savings throughout our budget that should make up for any concern on that. But I just want to make sure to bring this budget on budget at the end of the year. I will be bringing the board a projection on what I think the ending balance will be at the next board meeting in May. I do this typically, and typically I'll bring also supplemental appropriations or any budget category transfers that are necessary. This one's going to take a little bit longer because I'm going to have to probably meet with each director or supervisor and ask them to help me forecast under this emergency situation what the expenditures are going to be for the rest of the year. So that's going to take a little bit more time. I've already started that process. If anything changes drastically before the meeting that gives me more concern, we'll make sure to communicate that to the board by email. But I believe for 2020, we should be able to bring the year in on budget or below budget, and I don't foresee right at this point any major issues to doing that. Along those, before I get into the 21 budget, along those lines, there is one policy that I've identified. There might be more, but this one came to my mind. In making sure we preserve expenses where we can. There's a policy that we implemented several years ago to incentivize those who miss 3 days or less in leave time. And those are for teachers only that require substitutes. The policy reads that we will pay out any savings on that substitute line out to any teacher that misses three or less days a year. There's going to be money not spent in that line because we're not bringing substitutes in right now. I think the spirit of that is to pay out that money, but my recommendation would be that we make a change to that policy, and I'll bring that in May, and say we'll prorate that amount based upon how many days kids were in school this year. So whatever savings is there will be split between the actual days that we're in school, and then we'll capture some savings to help bring this budget in for the rest of the year. So that would be my recommendation that I would bring to the board in May on that policy, because it doesn't stipulate any kind of condition or situation we're in currently. I think I'll just stop there, because that's a change to the policy that I'll be bringing, and see if there's any questions or if there's a consensus of the board that I should move forward in that direction.
Any questions for Mr. Hagler?
On just that budget piece or
Well,
so far?
in general.
I think he's specifically asking about that substitute payout thing.
Yeah,
I mean, you're not voting tonight. He's going to bring it the next
Well, I
time.
mean,
But
if we come to consensus, can we have him move forward? I mean, I think that sounds
Okay.
reasonable. Ms. Harrison, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Ms. Gerber?
And it will still be 3 days or less. We're not lessening the days because it's a shorter year. So if you miss 3 or less days, you'll still qualify. So no change on that. So
Dr.
thank you
Hicks?
very much for that. For the 21 budget,
Hey, Mr. Hagler, hang on a second.
Yeah.
Dr. Hicks, are you on board with that?
I'm fine with that.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Hagler. You got consensus on that.
all right, thank you very much. On the 2021 budget, I think there's a lot more unknowns on that. I believe we've received some communication, and I think the Board of Supervisors have put aside or suspended some of their work sessions until they have more information. But I believe that we're hopeful, or I think the best case scenario for us right now is probably level funding for our budget next year with no increases. They're concerned about their revenues and making sure that they can get through the following year, and we understand that. So from the local side, I think that's where we'll end up. That's not guaranteed. They still have to pass the budget and have to work through whatever revenue forecast they still have to project on. The bigger unknown is the state. The governor will be proposing a veto budget on Saturday. He's been working, I'm sure, with all agencies on that, but the rhetoric we're hearing on that is that there's going to be some cuts. And I don't think K-12 will be escape that from the original budgets that we received from the General Assembly just about a month ago, I guess. And so with that, we've heard numbers as large as $1 billion being cut. I'm not sure if that's over one of the years or over the whole biennium, but there's a lot at stake. And I think the original budget that you all passed, as Dr. Shook mentioned at the beginning, we're probably going to have to start over and kind of look at what that is. As soon as we have those numbers, we'll communicate those as quickly as possible. I expect I'll have a worksheet from the Department of Education by next Friday. They just have to get all those changes built in and get that communicated to us. So we'll communicate to the board as soon as we can on numbers from the state.
Mr. Hagler, can I jump in for a second too?
2021 budget.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Hagler. In addition to the governors, and you may have mentioned this, the General Assembly itself has their veto session, I believe, on the 22nd of April. Is that correct?
Yeah, 22nd.
So we're hearing two things. One is that they may be able to get that work done and give us a budget. The other, more likely, is that they're going to do some type of stopgap budget that, again, Mr. Hagler mentions the rhetoric, that what we're hearing the governor say is a temporary halt to all new spending in the budget. We just don't know exactly how to interpret that, because there was a lot of new money for public education in the rebenchmarking, in the pay increase, in counselor ratios, and ELL teachers. And so we just have to, not be too gloomy and doomy at this point, but kind of watch it. And I guess the point that I want to make is we may come back and ask you all in May to adopt another budget based on the state. The state might come back in the summer or the fall, given these circumstances, if we turn the corner on this thing and the economy rebounds, and try to put some of that money back. So there might even be a in-year adjustment to the budget, which again is something we don't typically do. So again, I'm not saying to board members that will happen. It's just, it's like we said with everything else. There's not a playbook for this. And I guess that's a message to our community, our employees as well, that maybe what we have to do in May may not be the final for next year, but it probably is where we're going to have to start.
Mr. Hagler, is there anything on the table at the federal level? Or is that,
There is
just
stimulus
distributed?
money.
Is that just distributed down to the
We're
states?
hearing a lot of information. There will be money that is distributed that comes through the state
Okay.
and will be distributed to school systems. I believe those monies are not going to be for reoccurring items, like salaries or anything like that. It'll be for the emergency related expenditures that we'll have to claim and seek reimbursement. And we're waiting for more information on that, but there is federal money that will be flowing through the state. And we'll be watching that closely to make sure that we put everything in that we need, that we can claim.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hastings?
I will say also, just because some of our employees might be listening, we're hopeful that the state can give us something in a timely manner. But with what they're dealing with, if they go longer or take longer to decide these things, we'll have to wait till we have worksheets and actual dollars from the state before we can pass a final budget. So we're still hopeful that we can get contracts out to our.
In discussions with the county, has there been any conversation around the use of the $30 million rainy day fund?
We have not discussed that. That's in their revenue, and they do have reserves put aside. I think they have a lot of unknowns about what the revenue is going to be next year. So I think their idea is going to pass a very conservative budget on the expenditure side. And if they need to pull from those funds to either make us whole or for them to get through next year, those funds would be available. So they can fulfill their commitment to us, if it's level funding, that they can give it all to us, regardless of how their revenues come in. So I think they're taking a very conservative approach, and it's probably appropriate at this time.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other? Go
I have
ahead.
one last issue.
Yes.
This one is another one that I probably need consensus for the board, and didn't want to make this one unilaterally. Dr. Shook and I talked about this extensively, and we thought the board needed to weigh in on this one. Most of the large insurance carriers out there, I think many of our employees and other people watching the news have heard that they have waived the cost of the treatment for people diagnosed for the coronavirus here. And I think there's a specific date up until May, but that's for fully insured plans. That does not include us. We had already waived the testing, so the employees don't incur any cost on that. This is a little bit more difficult one because I'm always thinking about what's the right thing to do here and where we should go. For self-insured plans, we have to make a decision by April 17th, and I have to communicate that to Anthem. There's 2 points I'd like to make on this. One is that for the rest of our employees that might not have this virus or have any symptoms or have any treatment of it, there's no waiving of what they may be going through. So somebody that might have another condition, we've never waived those coverages before. And so there might be a little bit, I don't know if there would be or not. I'm just saying there could be saying, hey, I didn't get any waiving of my copay or my deductible, but these individuals did. And also there's usually pretty specific dates set. So if they go up until May, there's no guarantee they wouldn't extend that. But with this virus, somebody might get it at any time. They might get it in September, December of next year. So I'm concerned about saying anybody that gets it here for a month or two, that we would waive their expenditures on their deductible or copay, but somebody that would get it a little bit later beyond that date, it would not be waived. So I thought very hardly on this, and Dr. Shook and I really talked about this quite a bit. It would be my recommendation at this point to not waive that on our self-insured plan. I think our consultants, I asked them, and I think it's about 30% of their book of business has waived it. So 70% has not at this time. It's a hard decision, I know. We're talking about people that are getting sick, but I'm trying to provide an equitable and a fair system. The estimated cost from our consultants, and this is a rough estimate because it depends on how many people have to receive expensive treatment, would be $1.5 1.5% to 3%. So I would estimate that around $400,000 to $500,000 on our self-insured plan. So I felt like I needed to bring a recommendation to the board, but I understand if you want to go in a different direction, I'll go ahead and waive those. But I think I needed to bring this in for a decision on the board. So I'll be happy to answer any questions on that topic and look for some guidance.
Questions for Mr. Hagler?
Mr. Hagler, I have a question. The 400,000, 500,000 price range that you gave, is that cumulative or is that individual? I'm just help me understand that figure.
No, that's what they would. That's a rough estimate of how much we may have to pay out, for anybody that was getting treatment for this, and that would be over that specific time period. If no one received treatment, it'd come in at zero. If more of our employees actually got sick and needed treatment, it could come in more. They're doing the best they can to estimate, to give me an idea, but it could be a lot more. There's no way of telling, and I don't have any way of predicting how much that would cost, but they did give me some kind of estimate. But we're early into this emergency,
Right.
so they're using current data to make estimates, but things change every day.
Was there a time frame attached to this 400 to 500K estimate?
I think it's anybody that it went back, and I think the time frame is that anybody receiving treatment, I believe, up until the end of May. I'll have to double check that, but the Anthem document that I would have to authorize has a specific date set into that. It wouldn't be continuous for anybody that got it into indefinite future.
Okay.
And that's my biggest concern. If somebody actually gets diagnosed and gets treatment and it's 2 days after that deadline, then they don't get waived.
Yeah.
But people prior did. Like I said, it's not an easy decision. I can understand both sides, but my recommendation is that we don't waive it.
Mr. Hagler, you mentioned that about 30% of our carriers, other clients have waived it. Did you get any sense of what other school divisions are doing, if they are among that 30% or are they among the 70%?
Not all of them are self-insured. Without going forward, and I have talked to some of my other colleagues, their recommendation is not. From two of them, I've heard that they are recommending not to waive it, but I don't know if their board has waived in or if they, but their recommendations from their finance directors is not to not waive it, which is the same as mine at this point. And I think for the reasons I've stated, but.
No, I'm just saying that I just feel badly. People can't help getting sick, and
Saracen, do you have?
No, I don't.
Ma'am?
I don't have any questions. So.
Okay. No questions. Johnson, anything else? Ms. Kirby?
No.
How's everybody feel?
Well, this is a
Haley?
tough one. This is very difficult to make a decision like this. And I know, Mr. Hagler, that you need an answer. But I need time to think about this. Can we get back with you in May?
No, I have to make a decision by
You have to
April
make a
17th.
decision. Okay, by the 17th. Oh, wow.
I think if it's helpful, because this is very difficult, and I think Mr. Hagler explained this, but I think it's important to reiterate, the districts that have fully insured plans that aren't like ours, where we're actually paying the claims out of our own reserves,
Right.
the insurance companies themselves are offering that, and they have the ability to recoup that down the road through their rate packages, much like, I don't know what you guys have for auto insurance, but I got an email today from USAA saying they're going to discount the next 2 months because people aren't driving as much. And I think all the major, and so they can do that. Our situation is different, and I think so. You may hear of some other school districts that are fully insured saying, "Oh, we're doing this for our employees." Well, those boards aren't making those decisions. You know, Anthem is doing that, or Aetna, or whoever their healthcare provider is, and so I think the challenge really is: do we want to carve out coverage for one specific ailment and its treatment? And I think that's where Mr. Hagler and I struggle. So if you get corona, it is covered. If you have a heart condition, if you have a kidney condition, all these other things, then the current policy kind of applies. And so I think that's where we fall on the side of our coverage is our coverage.
Right.
Let's pay for the tests, so we encourage people to do that. And also because of the exposure, we don't know how much could be drained from this fund, and that impacts our budget and our ability to cover
right.
everybody. So again,
I would like to add, Dr. Shook,
Yeah.
I did.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I was watching monitor here and you were still speaking. I think there was a delay. What the insurance carrier, or what our insurance carrier, Anthem has done on its fully insured book is, I believe they're waiving that cost from April 1st to May 31st. So they're asking if we want to, as a self-insured, go with the same thing that they're doing. So it's only for treatment April 1st to May 31st. And what about somebody that starts getting treatment on June 2nd? So that's the thing I had to consider. But and I understand the board members. It's a hard decision. You want to be compassionate, and we are. But
This is a complete unknown.
It is.
Yeah, it is. There's no predicting
Yeah.
which way things are going to go. I mean, that's the bottom line.
And I think the point that Dr. Shook made in terms of us not being fully insured, I mean, that's a big major piece here that we can't dismiss. So.
Dr. Mealy, your thoughts?
I just feel so badly. I mean, in this time, people who, a spouse could have lost their job. I mean, it just seems to be, a cascading series of events. But I am very concerned that it could spiral out of control. I mean, we just have this is just, you're taking a stab in the dark, hoping it will be at 400,000 or 500,000, and it could be much more than that. It could be less. It could be much more. So I don't know that we can take that chance, I guess. That's, what are we going to do if it spirals out of control beyond anything we can control?
Ms. Harrison, you on same opinion?
I am of the same opinion, as difficult as it is, but I am.
Ms. Carpenter?
Same.
Johnson?
Regrettably the same.
Bill? I regrettably also am of the same opinion. So, Dr. Hicks?
I'm in agreement. I don't think we should waive.
Okay. Mr. Hagler, you have consensus that we will not waive at this time.
okay, and just thank you all for considering and discussing this. I hope none of our employees are in dire shape, but we'll monitor and try to keep up to date with what's going on with that. Just to let you know, once employees hit their deductible, then our plans kick in and start paying for it. So it's not, they're on the hook indefinitely for this. And we do have stop loss insurance for, major things, but we do have exposure here. But I think the recommendation for me was not as much for the exposure. We do have reserves, but that could dwindle pretty quickly. It was really about a fairness issue between employees and treating employees fairly. I try to always recommend that and consider their situations.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for either Dr. Dewis, Dr. Woodford, or Mr. Hagler?
No. No, thank you for all that information.
We need to get a cutout of him.
Yeah.
We do need to cut out of him.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Got a motion by Dr. Mealy, second.
Second.
Second, Ms. Kirby. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Dr. Hicks. Poor Dr. Hicks.
Diana, do you want us to take these